Well, Patriots fans, everyone's calling you the regression kings of the 2026 season. My advice, wear that thing like a crown. Take it with you to the resort in Arizona, to the bar in New York. Use it to get out of a speeding ticket. Just wear it like armor. And there's nothing that the nerds in their regression can say or do to hurt you. And just go out and stick it to them this season and go win the Super Bowl. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 12 team in my power rankings as we head into the start of the 2026 NFL season. A bit of a surprising one here as we have the defending AFC champion New England Patriots. Obviously, I made jokes in the cold open there, but in the many years that I've been doing this, the Patriots really do scream regression with a historically easy schedule and a very significant run of good health on top of that, not just with their own team, but Bo Nix going down the week before they had to play them in the AFC Championship really opened the door for them to go and get their ass kicked in the Super Bowl. And it's just the reality of the situation. You go to the Super Bowl, the bar gets raised to the highest degree, especially for a Patriots fan base that has come to expect the best out of their team due to the Brady-Belichick dynasty. So the stakes are high, and the Patriots, in my opinion, have a lot of things that they're going to have go right for them and improve upon in their own right if they can live up to those high expectations. Obviously, this number 12 spot in the power rankings is probably not where a lot of Patriots fans want to see their team just as we head into the start of this season. But I do know there's a lot of smart Patriot fans out there too that understand there's a lot of context going on here. But those smart fans also understand that this Patriots team might actually be a better football team this year, and they just might have enough to combat some of the regression that is going to hit this team in some shape, way, or form. So in today's video, we're going to talk all about the 2026 Patriots, their strengths, weaknesses, where they may have got better, and of course, where some of those big question marks are for this team this year as well. Before we do get started, though, if you could do me a huge favor, please take just a second to hit that like button down below. It's a free, quick and easy thing that really does support this channel and this series. It pushes this video out to other football sickos just like you. Make sure you're subscribed as well so you don't miss the remaining 11 deep dives here as we count down and lead up to the number 1 team in my power rankings. And lastly, do not go anywhere in this video. We have a very special interview, a first-time guest on the channel, Schatz, an NFL analyst for ESPN and the lead analyst with the FTN Fantasy website, which is the home for DVOA, something I reference a lot in this series. So we have in this video here an interview with the father of DVOA, Schatz, who created it, what has become really an industry standard for team rankings and a nice way to measure success and future success for that matter. So you're not going to want to miss that interview. And also, I lied. I have one more plug. The hats are for sale. You guys have been awesome jumping in, getting the hats while you can. There is less than a third of the supply left, so go get that good. Head to thatfranchisestore.com. Really happy with how these turned out and very thankful that so many of you have been excited to get your hands on them as well. Been fun to see the photos from you guys in the Discord or on Twitter tagging me with you and your new hats. So I love it. Let's go ahead and get started, though, with this Patriots deep dive. As always, we'll go through every aspect of the team, through the roster and the coaching staff. We'll begin every segment there asking the big question, did they get better, worse, or stay the same from their offseason changes? Now, we'll start with the coaching staff, and it's an easy answer. Staying neutral. After a Super Bowl run, they're able to get the band back together. A big part of them hiring Josh McDaniels to begin with was you knew he probably wasn't going to get a third gig as a head coach if things go well here. And sure enough, really no head coach interviews, despite the fact that Josh McDaniels did a great job as the offensive coordinator here last year. But yeah, keeping things the same with the coaching staff. There is a little bit of a shift as at defensive coordinator, which is also just beneath Mike Vrabel, who is a defensive mind, who's involved with the defense, certainly. But Terrell Williams, thank goodness, appears to have won his battle against cancer and is back with the team, helping out to some capacity. He was supposed to be the defensive coordinator last year. Zach Kerr stepped up into that title, and now Kerr does keep the title of defensive coordinator, and Terrell Williams gets the title of assistant head coach. But it's kind of a trident, three-pronged approach in terms of the defensive staff, with New England all beneath Mike Vrabel. But let's talk about that Mike Vrabel. Diana Rossini headlines aside, I'm not going to get into that. That, I think, is for people that are more interested in that type of subject matter. I'm not going to act like I'm a fan of it, but I'm also not going to act like it really changes my opinion on who Mike Vrabel is as a football coach, or that it's going to impact the team in some way this season. So that'll be shutting the door on Diana Rossini, Mike Vrabel conversations right there. Though we'll keep the door open for some jokes if anything comes up. But Vrabel, as we knew from his Tennessee tenure, is a phenomenal head coach and gets into the top 10 for me, is my 10th ranked head coach right now. And I'm proud to say, even though the Patriots' initial ranking last season was quite low, as they headed into the season with everything to prove, and they certainly made that ranking, quote unquote, age like milk. While I was tragically low, if you will, on ranking this team coming into the year, just as I think everybody was, I'm proud to say I did have Mike Vrabel as a top 10 head coach last year. And to see him do what he did with New England last year, I suppose, wasn't a huge surprise. He has really elevated football teams beyond just last season. He, to me, is one of the best CEO, culture building, locker room building coaches out there. Just an amazing leader would be an easy way to say that. And I think the belief system with him as the head coach on this team, it became evident very quickly that, this could be a championship type of culture. So he's always checked those boxes, and he is a very good defensive mind as well. Now, there's other chefs in the kitchen, of course. They're all kind of building this defense together. But Vrabel does have a defensive coaching background. Obviously, a former linebacker of this team, came up playing in that Bill Belichick system, and learned as a coach beneath Romeo Crennel as well. So he's going to have his influence on this defense one way or another. And the scheme that they ran last year, absolutely consistent with the vision of a Mike Vrabel defense, which is kind of his own version of a Bill Belichick kind of balanced 3-4 system. Now, in this series, I rank all these coaches, how they kind of stack up against all their counterparts throughout the league. And as far as the Patriots and Mike Vrabel and this combination of defensive coaches, they come in with pretty respectable rankings for the defensive coaching. 10th to 17th for pass defense coaching, and top 10 for run defense coaching, 7th to 10th. I don't know that I would say, focusing on Mike Vrabel again here, that he's an elite defensive mind. I think in my mind, and throughout Mike Vrabel's time in Tennessee and continued with what we got to see in his first year in New England last year, it's consistent with how I've always viewed him, which is he's a very good defensive mind, maybe not an elite one, not someone I would stack up with like Mike McDaniels and Brian Flores and some of these guys that are doing like really innovative, crazy stuff and like really elevating their defenses through the scheme. I don't necessarily view Mike Vrabel in that sense. I think he runs a fair scheme and communicates and coaches it well. Again, a very good defensive coach, borderlining on, top 10, top 12. So that's kind of reflected in the defensive coach rankings there. And then what kind of helps him creep up towards being more of a top 10 head coach is he is a coach that is more than capable of being a prominent defensive mind in his organization, while also being excellent at the leadership, CEO, culture building side of things, which is, of course, a major benefit to a Mike Vrabel, where you might get some CEO type coaches that are good leaders, but don't really bring anything to the table, schematically speaking. You might get some coaches that are really excellent X's and O's gurus, but not quite the leadership side of things. We've questioned guys like Brian Daboll, Mike McDaniels at times. Like, it's really nice to have a coach that can bring multiple things to the table in that sense. even if he does trail behind some other defensive minds around the league, in my opinion. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time detailing what a Mike Vrabel defense looks like, schematically speaking, of course, run through Zach Kerr and with the assistance of Terrell Williams as well, who are both very much disciples of his. Both were with Vrabel in Tennessee, and in the case of Zach Kerr, he even followed Shane Bowen over to Tennessee for that job. Williams has been around a little bit longer and has, to be fair, coached under some other big names there, including Lou Anarumo, Vance Joseph, Dennis Allen, and Aaron Glenn. That coaching tree all the way back to being with Dennis Allen with the Raiders and also in Detroit in 2024 before reuniting with Mike Vrabel. And this system is honestly only as complicated as you want to make it, if that makes sense. In my mind, this is actually a really well-crafted, somewhat traditional, balanced 3-4 defense. But it could certainly be viewed as more of a complex type of defense as well, because to me, this is the type of scheme that we've kind of talked about a little bit with like a Lou Anarumo, Steve Spagnuolo, where they want to expand the playbook. They want to build in the possibility to run any sort of coverage, even any sort of base front if need be, though they definitely live in a 3-4 type of base, but can get multiple if need be. For example, 15% of their base defensive structures were still in some form of 4-3. So you will see some adaptability in terms of, the construction of their front. And that goes back to the Bill Belichick roots where they were always 3-4, but could mix it up. And even some years they leaned to be more of a 4-3 type of team, depending on how their roster was constructed. But especially when you just break down what sort of coverages they run, what's their blitz rate, it's all just pretty balanced. And I've said this in previous videos too, like anytime you see a team be maybe bottom 10 in cover 3 percentage, that's probably a pretty good sign that they are one of these more like adaptable, maybe balanced defenses from a coverage call perspective, because that's the preferred coverage in the league. And even for the Patriots, who ran at the 25th least in the NFL, 28.4%, cover 3 was still their number one called coverage. But they're also towards the top of the league in cover 1, cover 4, cover 2. The one thing they don't really run a lot of is cover 6. And they also didn't end up zero blitzing a lot, at least in the regular season, yet they were a relatively aggressive blitzing team, or at least an average aggressive blitzing team, right in the middle of the league, 15th in blitz rate. But I do think this is a team that's going to try and coach everything up, build the defense in a way that you can be man heavy one week, you can be cover 3 heavy one week, you can be split safety, cover 2, cover 4 heavy one week. And even in the playoffs, the Patriots' zero blitz percentage tripled. They go from a 3.9% zero blitz percentage up to 11.6 in the playoffs. And we did actually see their defense have the most success they've had all year, blitzing a lot more. And specifically, blitzing everybody a lot more with those zero blitzes. So we'll see if that rate comes up after they witnessed some success doing that last year. But I do think their in-season adaptability to see that big spike at the end of the season really does speak to their ability to game plan, recognize weaknesses, and pivot to whatever they need to do. And that is, at the end of the day, the Bill Belichick philosophy. No one was really better at it than Bill, but Mike Vrabel sure as hell is not bad at implementing this type of defense as well. And he's got some pretty big name assistants at this point helping him out too, with Terrell Williams and Zach Kerr, who's a name that I think is starting to climb the ladder a little bit here. So that is your Patriots overall head coach plus defense coach look. Let's flip over now to the offensive side of things, which is ever important when you have kind of a defense or CEO style head coach. I said it from the get-go. I love the idea of the Josh McDaniels hire because if he's good, you aren't going to lose him like so many offensive coordinators next to a, defensive-minded head coach would end up leaving. And that certainly played out. Josh McDaniels is here to stay and probably here to stay for the long haul. And that's phenomenal, man. He's going to get to continue to build this rapport with Drake May that clearly worked last season. We saw this with Josh McDaniels and Tom Brady. There's so many reasons for their playoff success, but how many times do you hear these little stories about it's the fourth quarter and some defense is giving them trouble, and Tom Brady and Josh McDaniels were able to quickly be like, hey, remember that thing that we did 4 years ago against this defense that we're dealing with right now? Let's make that adjustment right now. Drake May is still young, but realistically, I think you could set that up for a 10-plus year relationship with these guys, because Josh McDaniels has just failed so miserably in the head coaching chair, but we know he's a great offensive coach, especially from a pass game design where he's pushing top 10, ranks 9th to 15th for pass game coaching. I do have more questions with the run game. I've never been overly moved by Josh McDaniels in the run game. It's not horrible rankings either, 14th to 23rd. So you got a decent baseline there. But I think even last year, I was diving into TreVeyon Henderson tape, and we're going to get to TreVeyon Henderson, but there was a lot of run call. And I can be hard on TreVeyon Henderson, but there's a lot of run calls too, where I'm just like, what are we trying to do here? So I think Josh McDaniels is fine with his more north and south man gap, inside run game focused run design. Did feel like last year with a TreVeyon Henderson trying to get the ball to the outside, get some more of those explosive schemed up for your lightning style back. That's something I want to see them get better at, because there was a lot of times where they're trying to get those tosses and sweeps going with Henderson, and it was everybody knew that was coming, and it was horribly blocked. So I'm not going to sing Josh McDaniels praise from a run game perspective necessarily, but yeah, I definitely think his ability to work with quarterbacks, have more of a pro style passing game, a fair balance of under center, shotgun, certainly ability to load up with heavy personnel, play action shots and that kind of stuff, get into the drop back passing game. One thing that is a bit of a Josh McDaniels unique staple at this point is the use of 21 personnel, and that comes in two different forms with him. You do see your fair share of pony personnel, which is the use of two running backs out there, and that was a part of why they wanted TreVeyon Henderson, for him and Stevenson to be out there at the same time. But they also will utilize a fullback, and that goes back to his days in the Tom Brady offense, and they're hopefully upgrading at fullback as well, going from Westover to Reggie Gilliam, friend of the channel. Reggie Gilliam uses my Madden roster. So Reggie, if you're watching, what's up? Go Patriots. But in so many ways, the offensive scheme with Josh McDaniels is a reflection of the defensive philosophy, the ability to be adaptable and take a look at what defense you're facing and what type of game plan you want to have that week, and continuing to develop that Rolodex of, basically memory and experience with a quarterback, as he was able to do with Tom Brady, can become lethal when you are essentially a playbook that has a wide expanse of possibilities compared to maybe more of I would say it like a Shanahan playbook, very effective, but a little bit more condensed, more like we're going to do what we do and you try to stop it. This is more of a adaptable, or even you could call it reactionary approach in many ways. But it's great that he's here, and I'm expecting going to be here for the long haul. And it rounds out a really nice staff here in New England, who obviously did a phenomenal job last year. I think this is quite easily top 10. I think is where I'm comfortable saying this staff should place. To me, the top 5 coaches are coaches I would regard as true elite gurus at their own expertise. I'm not going to describe, again, Josh McDaniels as an elite offensive mind. I kind of like Mike Vrabel would say he's a very good offensive mind, with Mike Vrabel being a very good defensive mind. And when you have an elite CEO, leader of the organization, that can combine to be just a really nice high-end staff, as we see here in New England. So it's a really good starting point there that I think sets the table quite nicely for everything else we're going to talk about here today. Now, before we do get into this roster, I want to thank the sponsor for today's deep dive, and that is SeatGeek. Obviously, we have NFL preseason games are alive and well, so all of you can go out, check out your team, grab your binoculars, put your scouting hat on, and see what 52nd, 53rd sleeper players are going to make your team getting playing time in the fourth quarter. Or SeatGeek is the official partner of the MLB. And Red Sox fans, dude, what the hell is going on? They can't lose a game. So go support your Red Sox, go to Fenway, be a part of something special going on out there, or to all of you other baseball fans out there, go enjoy the nice weather while it's still here. But SeatGeek's got you covered with the best app, the best prices, the best user interface, where they color code every seat. Just look for the green dots. You know you're getting the best bang for your buck, not just on SeatGeek, but across the market as well. They make everything easy to use. You get the tickets right there in your SeatGeek app. And right now, if you use code TFG10 at checkout, you will save up to $20 on that next purchase as well. So a big thanks to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's deep dive. And let's now get into this Patriots roster, where we're going to start at quarterback, and we'll take a look at their offseason changes at quarterback. I ended up going with the Fenway Park shirt to represent the Patriots today, but I really could have worn the Tommy Cutlets sweatshirt as well, as the Patriots did pick up Tommy DeVito to be their backup quarterback for whatever it's worth. I feel like he's a decent enough backup. But they do say goodbye to Josh Dobbs, who's another decent enough backup. They also draft Baron Morton out of Texas Tech in the 7th round. Not someone I really thought was draftable, but whatever. 7th round pick doesn't really matter. But yeah, staying neutral at quarterback, as obviously this thing centers around Drake May. And I think a huge fascination with this video is, where am I going to rank Drake May? As I rank every player at every position group in this series. We're at an interesting point with Drake May. We really are. We've seen some of these young quarterbacks like CJ Stroud, Jaden Daniels come out, have these incredible rookie seasons, and then take a total step back the next year. Drake May, granted it wasn't his rookie season. It kind of felt like it was, because year one was always going to be a rough, wasted year for him. But we kind of got that experience with Drake May last year, where he was unbelievable in the regular season, a genuine MVP candidate, kind of planting his flag as a top 5 QB in the league, and someone trending towards, that elite tier, right? And then the playoffs hit, and there's no way to sugarcoat it, man. He was brutal in the playoffs. And yeah, they went to the Super Bowl. It was not because of Drake May, man. It was not. I'm sorry, Patriots fans. I know it's not fun to hear, but the tape was ugly, and the metrics back it up too. This was the worst postseason performance by a quarterback in the EPA era. Ironically, the next worst was 2015. Peyton Manning, showing that you can play poorly and win a Super Bowl. Drake May played poorly, went to the Super Bowl. The next guy below that, Rex Grossman, 2006, played like he was Rex Grossman, still went to the Super Bowl. So it's a team sport, right? Drake May couldn't hold on to the football. He was making more bad mistakes than we've seen from him. And to me, his most concerning trait, I love Drake May as a prospect, right? And I'll get that out of the way too. Like, I have no reason to lie about what I saw with Drake May. I loved him as a prospect. I hammered the Commanders for not taking him instead of Jaden Daniels. I have every reason to glaze up Drake May. I'm just, as I do on this channel, calling it like I see it. But despite how much I love Drake May as a prospect, the one thing that was with him was he doesn't really feel that space behind the pocket all that well, whether it's a blindside rusher winning early or just the natural decomposition of the pocket. All these elite quarterbacks just kind of navigate that space so naturally, like a sixth sense with their spatial awareness. Patriots fans should know what that looks like. You saw it with Tom Brady, who's one of the best ever in that trait. I think that really became exposed as a weakness right now for Drake May with all the strip sacks and the bad sacks he took. And just generally speaking, the more the pass rush heated up for him, as Will Campbell was playing injured, you're playing championship caliber defenses and great pass rushes. Not only does it lead to like negative plays and wasted opportunities on tape, I do think it leads to some of that sort of pocket trauma and the lack of confidence to do what you've done in the past. You start to kind of question everything a little bit more if you don't have that like baseline composure with that pocket feel. And I think we saw that all start to compound into some really bad quarterback play. And that, of course, all came to a screeching halt in the Super Bowl where Drake May just, I mean, he looked like a fish out of water in that Super Bowl. Anybody that didn't watch the NFL season and just showed up to the Super Bowl party would have watched this and be like, how did these guys get to the Super Bowl, right? Like they were clearly outclassed and outmatched. So that did happen, and it's very fresh on our minds. It's the last month of football that we saw Drake May play. It's something that needs to be considered, as does his elite regular season that also does need to come with the context that they played a historically easy schedule. Aaron Schatz in our interview has a pretty alarming number for just how easy the schedule was last year. Now, they played some good defenses on that schedule. I can't take that away from Drake May. But even when you're going against a defense like the Browns, certainly takes a lot of pressure off of the quarterback when you still have a 3-score lead, for example. Because even some of the good defenses they faced had no offenses to back it up. So if you're, under pressure and third down, you don't have to force a tough read. You can live for the next drive in those situations. But I got to stop bringing up negative things with Drake May here too, because he was phenomenal. He was everything you could have dreamed of in year 2 with Drake May. All of his incredible tools on full display. I mean, the arm is electric. He can put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants. He's out here dropping dimes down the field from the pocket, hitting 25, 30-yard deep outs with the best of them. I think his accuracy is quite good. He's extremely mobile. And when he takes off and runs, he's one of the best scrambling threats in the NFL. I think there's even more to be tapped into from a designed QB run element with how dynamic he is with his legs. Of Drake May's 628 rushing yards, only 43 of those came on designed runs. You look at like what the Bills do with Josh Allen, what the Eagles do with Jalen Hurts. I feel like you could do some of that stuff. You don't have to do it a ton. You don't want to get him killed and banged up, but he's big, he's fast, he's quick, he's relatively instinctive with the ball in his hands. So like that's another thing that he can bring to the table. That there is no lack of a physical tool to hold Drake May back. I do think the feel in the pocket that we talked about, I'm not going to reiterate those points. I've always said all of the tier 1 elite quarterbacks have that trait, that pocket feel. To me, it's the exact same thing that's held Justin Herbert back from climbing into that elite tier. Maybe that happens with Drake May. But I think it's important to contextualize all this and the tale of two halves, or, regular season versus postseason that we saw with Drake May. It's relevant to mention the strength of schedule that they had last year. It's all good information to have. But at the end of the day, I think you can take a step back and just say, look, man, I know the stakes got raised once this team started to push for a Super Bowl, but we're talking about a year 2 quarterback that was legitimately in the MVP conversation, that played some incredible football, that can still get better with his processing and decision making, especially as essentially every young quarterback does. He should absolutely have the green up arrow on him to say he's going to keep getting better as a player. And we kind of had this conversation with Caleb Williams in some ways. There's obviously some different measures of context, but it's kind of the same idea where even same draft class, but like the Bears are being pegged for regression. The Patriots are being pegged for regression. The number one weapon that the Patriots have to counter that regression is for Drake May to just go nuclear and continue getting better with his game. And I understand he had a great regular season, but if he gets better when he goes up against some of these tough opponents and has some of these close games that are more of that playoff feel, you're going to be able to hopefully avoid the version of Drake May that we saw in the playoffs, because he could have more answers, both mentally and, yes, having better pass catchers and hopefully an improved offensive line is only going to help that as well. We'll get to that. I know it's weird to say because Drake May was an MVP candidate. It's weird to say that he can be better this year, and quite possibly in the regular season, he won't put up better numbers, for example, than he did last season. But I think at this point, Patriots fans are more thinking about playoff opponents and how this team's going to look in a repeat of them hopefully making the playoffs again this year. And a better version of Drake May is certainly going to be a great answer to counter some potential regression. Can you get a better, more equipped version of Drake May moving forward and counter what I think most people consider regression for the Patriots, which is realistically like, okay, is this team really a Super Bowl contender? Can they really get to the playoffs and take on these, actual championship contenders that they didn't really have to face last year until they saw the Seahawks? Well, if Drake May takes another leap forward like he did, anything close to what he did from year 1 to year 2, which was an unbelievable leap, the answer to that question should be yes this season. So I'm excited to continue watching Drake May. Right now, I have him as the 8th ranked quarterback heading into the year. I think some Patriots fans will say, he's the MVP runner-up. Look at the year he had. That's too low. I get it. And if you want to have him a couple spots higher than this, that's fine. This is where I landed, trying to balance one remarkable season followed by a egregiously terrible playoff performance and a little bit of that schedule factor in the middle of there. At the end of the day, though, this isn't the end-all, be-all. In fact, none of the quarterbacks I rank ahead of Drake May have that green up arrow, which is me saying he's going to continue to get better. This is just where I view him heading into the season. I think he can absolutely continue to get better and potentially sustain play as a top 5 quarterback, and maybe even someday creep into the conversation with who the 2 or 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL are, because I think it's all on the table for Drake May in a career that is just getting started. So there's your quarterback analysis for the Patriots, though I suppose, I glossed over Tommy DeVito there. I mentioned it earlier. I think he's a capable backup, reasonable signing, but not where you want to be if Tommy DeVito is getting games for the Patriots, needless to say. So let's talk about the rest of the surrounding cast here in New England. This was a big focus this offseason to improve things around Drake May so that he doesn't have to do quite as much here. A big part of this is, Drake May did what he did with a surrounding cast that was not bad, but certainly not a standout surrounding cast. And they want to help things around him and give him more answers. Now, we'll start at running back. That's not necessarily where they were focused. They didn't really do much this offseason. They do say goodbye to Antonio Gibson, who went down for an injury last year, was hardly a part of the team last year. They draft Jamarian Miller in the 7th round. Don't have very high expectations for him, so staying neutral at running back as well. But let's talk about this backfield here for New England. It's a fascinating one for me. I think just to get the ranking out of the way, it's a very competent, capable NFL backfield in a tier that ranks 21st to 27th. To me, not a standout backfield, but one that can certainly be good enough to have a really good run game and allow this team to do everything they want to do on the ground. Now, the big conversation here is going to center around Travion Henderson, the flashy, speedy, recent high 2nd-round draft pick out of Ohio State. I'm actually going to start, though, with the starting running back in New England, and that is Ramondre Stevenson. And Stevenson has had a complete roller coaster career here in New England, largely because of a case of the Butterfingers. I mean, he's had 10 fumbles over the last 2 seasons alone. It's put him in the doghouse. It's gotten him damn right benched at times. And to start this season, it was an issue once again. He came out kind of splitting carries, in many ways competing with the splashy new toy and TreVeyon Henderson, and fumbled 3 times in the first 5 weeks. He suffers turf toe not long after that. Around the week 8 mark, when he gets that injury and had dealt with some of these fumbles, it felt like a low point in Ramondre Stevenson's career. Fortunately for him, TreVeyon Henderson didn't really do anything throughout that 3-month stretch to take this job. And Stevenson comes back from turf toe week 12 and looks like a completely new man. From that point onward, he was up to 5.2 yards per attempt. His missed tackle force rate was up to almost 25%, which got him 8th in the NFL, 7th in overall PFF grade from that point onward. He was really good. And because of that, you could even argue for like a yellow arrow or an up arrow on Ramondre Stevenson. I think there is an argument there, but he is 28 years old. I don't know necessarily that he's going to exceed, say, this 81 rating that I have on him. But I do think it was enough to come back and say, yeah, no, he's still really good. And enough to say to me that he's going to be the lead runner of the football for this Patriots team, unless the fumble issues or injuries come back, which is always going to be possible with him. But he's a workhorse, man. He can move at almost 230 pounds. He obviously makes guys miss. We mentioned the missed tackle rate. He's got that contact balance, but he's got a jump cut on top of it. Sneaky good in the receiving game. Makes some really impressive catches down the field. He had almost double the yards TreVeyon Henderson had on about the same amount of receptions. 40 receptions for TreVeyon, 44 for Stevenson, yet double the efficiency for Stevenson. He's also a very good pass blocker. So honestly, when you look at it, not only is he a better runner of the football than TreVeyon Henderson right now, but he's also better in the area that you kind of expected Henderson to be great at, which is efficiency in the passing game and pass protection, where Henderson has just not stood out yet. And with how this team started to lean on Stevenson down the stretch, I don't know why that's going to change. So, like, not to spoil the very end of the video where I make my superlative picks, but someone's going to have to explain to me why Ramondre Stevenson is the 29th running back going off the board in your fantasy drafts, and TreVeyon Henderson is the 24th off the board. I think that's extremely fascinating. I think Stevenson's a really good complete back, unless the fumble stuff comes back. He seemed to get it figured out, though. Once he came back from that turf toe injury, he didn't fumble the ball once and managed to do that while staying super efficient. Sometimes these guys have fumble issues, and you see them out there, and they're just doing this all the time, and you lose all their efficiency. It wasn't the case with Stevenson. So I think he's a really good back. I don't feel the need to say he's like top 10 or not even really top 15, but he's a very quality starting running back who, honestly, in the second half of the last season did perform like a top 10 to 15 running back in the league. Now let's talk more about TreVeyon Henderson, because he's the exciting conversation here. Everybody's love child out of Ohio State. I was much lower on him as a prospect. I still thought he was talented. I see the speed, the big playability, but you take a running back inside the top 40 picks, the expectation is that that guy's going to be more of a workhorse for you, that he's going to be maybe capable of beating out a 27-year-old Ramondre Stevenson, especially after he loses carries for fumbling and gets turf toe for a month. And to me, Henderson's issue in college was a glaring issue for him at the NFL as well. He has genuinely some of the worst vision for a running back that you'll see. And that's especially a problem in a run scheme that prefers to run inside. The Patriots ran man gap scheme almost 30% of the time. That's a good 12% higher than the league average. Their outside zone rate was damn near at the bottom of the league at 15%, 10% below the league average. And really what I think we saw last year was this become quite predictable with TreVeyon Henderson out there. And it all centered around the fact that teams knew that he was just such an inefficient inside runner that when he was out there, you were probably going to get either that outside zone run or these toss plays that they kept running that teams just, you see the outside linebackers and the safeties, they were all over so many of these outside runs. So when you don't have the core base ability of a back that can pace his runs, anticipate openings inside the tackles, teams start to feel like, well, we already have a pretty decent job at plugging up the inside run, but even if we don't, there's probably a 50-50 chance TreVeyon Henderson screws it up anyway. Well, you completely lose the element of surprise. And I think that really did hurt their run game. And the other thing with Henderson, too, is not only do I really question his ability to anticipate gap openings, find and hit the right hole, but when he does clear into the second level and does hit the right hole, he is just such a one-speed player that he doesn't have that ability to change gears, to make guys miss at the second level. I think on top of that, his biggest strength is also a big weakness of his. His speed, his burst, it speaks for itself, right? And I'll talk about some of the positives of him too, right? There's stuff to like here. But he is such a one-speed, full speed ahead runner that it does leave a lot of meat on the bones of a lot of these runs, especially the inside runs when he does get into the second level. The second he clears a hole, he's going. And there was like 3 runs last year where the blocking was great, he hit it correctly, and boom, he's off to the races, right? Like you love that. That's going to be a fraction of a percentile of your total carries on the season. It's such a small part of your overall workload and efficiency. For every one of those, you have 2 more carries where he's taking a well-blocked run and going the wrong way. There's a carry against the Texans in the playoffs where they're running duo, and it's like a perfectly well-blocked run, and it looks like you took a fast 6th grader and dropped him on the varsity team, and he gets the ball and he looks like a deer in the headlights. And this isn't an NFL playoff game for a highly drafted second round pick. Like there are some major questions with him getting a negative return on what you expect on a lot of these runs. But there's also a middle ground between the negative plays and the awesome high-end plays where they're still decent runs, but you see these moments where he does get into the second level and there's no like creative reaction to what the next move could be. It's just he gets in that second level and all right, we're going to go try to go off to the races. And you'll see him either go head on with a safety or miss a cutback lane where there's actually a lot of meat left on the bones, where some of the great running backs in the NFL, they're better and more elusive and creative into the second level as well. And that's a part of the vision equation with him as well. He is such a one-trick pony. That one trick is sweet, but it can be frustrating as a coach when you have these well-blocked runs and you're expecting a 6-yard gain and he gives you 1 because he just rammed into the back of your center. And it can be especially frustrating when, because of that, teams stopped respecting your inside run game. And when you try to do the thing that TreVeyon Henderson's supposed to be good at and run crack toss and, give him jet sweep pop passes and run outside zone, teams are all over it because that's the only thing they're afraid of is him beating you outside the tackles, and they're ready for it. So it's tough. I think it's a problem. I think it's holding him and the Patriots run game back. I think there's a reason he saw so many less carries in the playoffs, but there's obvious physical talent and explosiveness there that they're hoping to tap into better. And it's not the end all be all. Running back vision can improve. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I definitely think there's a lot to fix. And I do question just, it's like the S2 test where they throw shapes at you and you just got to press the right buttons, like Guitar Hero, to just show teams what is your processing speed? Like how well does your brain visualize information and send that and relay that to your body? I question that that's an issue for TreVeyon Henderson, that he just doesn't process information quick enough. And if that's the issue, it's going to be hard to improve the vision. that could not be the issue. Maybe the coaches are able to fix this thing. For this one offseason, I'll be generous and put the up arrow on him and be optimistic that the vision can improve, but it absolutely must improve. And I think there's going to be some Patriots that look at this like, you're overhating. He had almost 1,000 yards. He had 987 yards last year. Well, yeah, that includes 4 playoff games, and he had 210 carries because he was such a highly drafted player. The other thing is, if you look at his 2 ridiculously long runs, one was a busted play against the Bills, and especially one, his longest run of the year was a 69-yard touchdown against Tampa, where the game's over. Tampa comes out in goal line, Patriots run a toss, and yeah, of course they didn't have the athletes to keep up with them in the perimeter in that unique situation. If you take those 2 runs away, Henderson goes down to 4 yards a carry on the season. It's not going to cut it. And then you also can bring up, like, the big selling point on him was supposed to be the pass protection and the ability to, like, catch dump offs and be elusive and be this receiving threat. I mean, there's major questions about his pass protection. That is not translated. And that lack of creativity out in space, the fact that he's a straight line speed threat, that's not really what you want in a scat back. You want someone that's got the stop start elusive ability. So yeah, I'm not super high on TreVeyon Henderson, man. I'm not. I'd love to be wrong. But he just, to me, doesn't really pass the eye test. And these were issues I really thought he had at Ohio State as well that are, I think, plaguing him a good bit. Definitely the most we're going to spend on a RB2 in this series, but he's probably the player in this video that I have a strong take on. So I definitely wanted to do like a deep dive in, I watched all his carries this year. I wanted to feel convicted in what I'm saying and not just talk out my ass. I did that this morning. I believe in what I'm saying here, but there's obviously room for him to get better as well. Ultimately glad we got a platform to have a conversation like that in this series, and now we just get to see how it plays out. But it really is just those 2 guys. As you look at the rest of the depth here, Terrell Jennings, kind of an undrafted type that did earn some carries here last year, maybe can be a decent RB3. Jamarian Miller, I was really not impressed by, tested really well, but you want to talk about a lack of instincts and a know-how at the running back position. Just watch Jamarian Miller tape at Alabama. It's the definition of underwhelming. Lan Larison, if he makes the team, might be the most interesting of these depth pieces after TreVeyon, just as a potential third down back. If Henderson continues to kind of disappoint there, if you want to keep Stevenson fresh and healthy, maybe you've got your next Danny Woodhead there in Lan Larison. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's an effective backfield. I like Stevenson. He's a good floor-raising piece. Henderson, despite his frustrations, is probably going to give you a few games where he has game-breaking speed and impacts the game in that sense. This is, still a 75 rating. That's still a functional piece of your offense. I just, I'm not drafting that with the 38th pick, and I can't match some of the hype that a lot of people have on him. But that's just where I come in on him. But let's move forward and talk about the receivers here in New England, where this offseason, this was definitely their core focus, was getting a better room of pass catchers for Drake May. And I think they achieved that with the addition of A.J. Brown, sending a future first-round pick for him. I think that was savvy because the upcoming draft class, by all accounts, is going to be absurd. And when I first saw that, my initial reaction was like, oh, the Patriots, like they're regression candidates this year. Like that pick could be a little higher than they're hoping. Not necessarily like a top 10 pick or anything like that, but there's, weird things happen in the NFL. That pick could be a little bit higher than you think, but then, oh, it's a 2028 draft pick. Even if I bring up some questions on the greatness of this team this year, I think by 2028, this team is heading in a really special place with Drake May and Mike Vrabel. So I think that was very good decision-making to go with the future draft pick for A.J. Brown. I'm on board with that. And then Romeo Doubs as well happened before. They go get A.J. Brown. And we'll talk about him. That's a good free agent signing as well. They do lose Stephon Diggs, who did play really well last year, but slowed down the stretch. But you gotta acknowledge that's 55% of their snaps of what was a really good wide receiver last year. So it's not nothing. But I still call it upgraded with those two pieces coming in. I did say neutral at tight end. They do lose Austin Hooper, who's a good second tight end. They draft Eli Raridan out of Notre Dame in the 3rd round. Excited to talk about him. And then you do bring in Reggie Gilliam as well, who's really one of the better fullbacks in the league. I think that's notable. But I said neutral at tight end / fullback. But let's break this group of weapons down. A unit that is right on the precipice of being a top 10 group of pass catchers for me this season, which is definitely a step up from, I think, last year, where they weren't bad, but they weren't top 10. Right now, they rank in that tier that goes 9th to 12th for me. And a big part of that is, like, obviously, anytime you're able to add a player with the potential impact of an A.J. Brown, that's a big deal. Now, Brown's coming off a down year. He does get the yellow arrow for me because I don't think he played up to, say, this 90 rating right here, which is still an immense amount of respect, kind of placing him more in the middle of what he's been in the past versus what he was last season. The 2 years prior to last year, he was an elite coded, say, high 90s type of player for me. Genuinely, heading into last year, I was starting to open up a debate on if he might be the best wide receiver in the NFL. And things got away from him last year. They did. And I will admit, like, he to me looked bigger, but not in a good way. Slower, stiffer, unable to separate the same way he always had done in Philadelphia and Tennessee with Mike Vrabel before that. The interesting thing is, he's 29 years old and a complete freak athlete. And it's not like there's some major injury scare there that could have led to that. But I did see it on tape, and it just wasn't the same A.J. Brown. And you have to acknowledge that. Like that, you don't want that version of A.J. Brown when you trade even a future first-round pick to get him. You want 2024, 2023 A.J. Brown. And I think the hope is reunite him with Vrabel, give him Drake May. There's all this talk about, Jalen Hurts isn't getting the best out of me, and I think there's relevant stuff there. So the hope is, okay, AJ Brown's a little more motivated, back in peak shape, and going to be back out there kicking ass, taking names, and hopefully you can get 2-3 years of peak elite AJ Brown. And that's the other side of that yellow arrow, is that he gets back up to being a true tier 1 take over games, funnel the offense through them, elite wide receiver. And really only time will tell there. But man, the upside's big here. To pair A.J. Brown, who's quite possibly the best go ball receiver in the league, winning in the peak of his powers because of how well he can win those catches down the field in addition to separating, with Drake May, who's one of the best deep ball throwers in the NFL, that's potentially electric. That's before you get into, the ability to use him over the middle of the field a little bit more, where he was so good in Tennessee. It's not just the go balls. You can do whatever you need A.J. Brown to do. So the potential's off the charts, but only time's going to tell like how good a shape he's in and if he is actually just kind of physically regressing here a little bit. But you do also have Romeo Doubs, who they signed to a very substantial contract in free agency, 3 years, $60 million. Really savvy contract too, as low as 4 years, $68 million, but a maximum value of $80 million. I think this was a contract that came out, like all the insiders had a different number on it. But it's essentially a 2-year, $24 million contract with some incentives in there where he could make more money, and 2 years of $20 million team options after that if he's playing well. It's a good deal for both sides, but I think especially for New England, if they can get what Romeo Doubs was last season. And I don't really see a reason why you wouldn't, other than potential concussion scares, where that was a big part of the Matthew Golden pick for Green Bay, was they were like, if Doubs gets another concussion, we don't know if his season's going to be over or where they're going to be at with that. And, concussions are a weird A weird conversation, right? But that seems to be in his past, but he does have a history of concussions. But I think his play on the field really just took that final step last year. I do. He's always been a good route runner. He's got good speed. He can separate. He's always been able to do that, but he's always been extremely unreliable in terms of drops and winning tough catches, where he'll just go on 4 weeks of being good at it, then 4 weeks of just really frustrating drops. To me, the reliability with Dobbs was night and day last year, and that's something that I do genuinely believe with enough time, confidence, and just development with the jugs machine, you can reach a point of that being a strength in your game. So I'm pretty optimistic that the drops and the lack of reliability, like that's not going to show back up, and that you've paid for a very good version of Romeo Dobbs here moving forward, especially as a number 2 to AJ Brown. You'd be obviously more, on the fence about it if he had to be your high-end number 1. But, if he can be kind of a Diet Coke version of what Devonta Smith was to AJ Brown, I think that's very reasonable. Brown's going to get all the attention, the number 1 corners. If they double team him, or you got to deal with, Pat Surtain 1 week, or he's having a hard time getting the ball to AJ Brown. Well, Dobbs, without much attention on him, is going to get open. And like I said, going to catch the ball. And a lot of times he's going to make some impressive, tough catches for you. And that's very Devonta Smith-esque, right? Not saying he's as good as Devonta Smith, but very much the same idea, the same path of construction for how that Eagles passing game was built. And I love that. And then you also have Demario Douglas as your slot, which just sign me up for a really quick, good route runner, easy early separation, good run after catch ability. Douglas is what he is. He's undersized. He's that speed slot type. But when you start to plug in a legit 1-2 punch like Brown and Dobbs ahead of him, it just starts to make all the more sense. And the other thing with New England is they probably have the best depth at wide receiver to, cushion yourself for injuries, but also just, rotate these guys, keep them fresh, keep them healthy. I'm really impressed with their top 7 wide receivers. I think they probably keep all these guys. You got a bunch of different skill sets here. You've got guys that had to be starters for them last year, right? Like Keyshawn Boutte, who, if I'm Keyshawn Boutte, I want to get traded because he's in a contract year. He's not going to get a big year this year as long as AJ Brown is healthy, because Boutte's just a worse version of AJ Brown. He's got size and physicality and wins tough catches as their ex. I think Boutte's probably making a bad career move by not trying to go somewhere and get production and get that money, but I respect the fact that he wants to try to win this Super Bowl and go for it here as one of the best depth pieces in the NFL. If he gets traded before the season starts, I wouldn't be stunned. But yeah, man, if AJ Brown gets banged up, you want to rotate AJ Brown, whatever, Boutte can play. He's a good wide receiver. If you didn't have AJ Brown and you just had Keyshawn Boutte, okay, they don't rank top 10, but it's still a pretty functional group. So that's incredible depth. You got Mac Hollins, who's also that big thumper. He's going to play on early downs because he's one of the better run blocking wide receivers out there. They love him in the locker room. He's kind of a weirdo, but I think he's their weirdo, if that makes sense. And he is, he plays special teams. He's a useful 6'4", 220-pound receiver. And him as a wide receiver 5, I really can't say enough about how awesome that is for a role for Mac Hollins. His utility is just really incredible. And then you have Kyle Williams, where there's a world where this played out, okay, maybe AJ Brown doesn't become available and they strike out on Romeo Dobbs in free agency. There's a world where they would probably feel okay putting more on Kyle Williams' plate here in year 2. He's a 3rd-round pick, really talented separator coming out, someone with real vertical juice. Definitely has drop questions and reliability concerns, but he's not going to get to play a ton here. For Kyle Williams fans and for Kyle Williams' sake, that's unfortunate, but he's incredible depth as a wide receiver 6. Then on a lot of other teams, you'd be looking at him it'd be a big deal if he could step up with the opportunities he has. Here, it's whatever you get from him is house money, but for play action shot plays, as a speed threat to come in off the bench on certain looks, that's a healthy, to say it's a healthy wide receiver 6 is the understatement of the year. That's awesome. And even Efton Chisholm, had just 4 catches last year as an undrafted free agent, but he made the team and looked great on those 4 catches. And he's the ultimate Demario Douglas backup. I think he can be a really good player from the slot. I think he could even, like, say you trade Keyshawn Boutte. I think Chisholm showed some route running and Z wide receiver stuff where he could maybe be a Dobbs backup as well. I would keep him around. I think he did enough in the very limited snaps he got to stand out. And then, like, at that point, it doesn't matter who the rest of your wide receivers are. You're not making this team. But that's a special group in terms of depth. Now, then you look at tight end, and Hunter Henry, like, not much analysis needed. I think he had a nice year. He's on the wrong side of 30 at this point. At some point, Father Time's going to catch up with him, but he was better last year, I think, than he was the year before, so there's not really any signs of regression. I've always wished Hunter Henry was a little bit of a better of a run blocker, but you know, he's a good, like, archetype possession tight end. Someone that I put a lot of pro comps on for tight ends just to kind of be what he is. You're cool with it, especially as things have gotten more dynamic around him, for sure. But that tight end 2 spot is probably the one area that was downgraded for now. Austin Hooper was a good tight end 2 here. He was. I was a little surprised they didn't bring him back, to be honest, considering it didn't cost anything. I like Raritan as a prospect. I think he's really fascinating. He's had multiple ACL injuries. I think if he's played 1,000 career snaps at Notre Dame, it's like barely. But he had the most playing time last season in that tight end factory at Notre Dame. 6'6" athletes aren't supposed to be able to move and run like him. He has undeniable upside. I think it's a really good opportunity for him to learn from Hunter Henry to slowly potentially overtake that job. The Patriots don't run a ton of 12 personnel. They ran it about, I think it was 19% of the time last year because they like to use the fullback with Reggie Gilliam instead with like 21 personnel, or they'll put both running backs out there. So it's not like Raritan in the Austin Hooper role. If he struggles as a blocker, which I didn't love his blocking tape, I didn't. Even for, Notre Dame tight ends are usually much better than Eli Raritan was, in my opinion, at run blocking. If he struggles at it, it's not going to derail your offense. It's going to probably limit in crunch time what formations you want to pound the ball out of. But outside of some learning curves there, I think he can absolutely handle a tight end 2 receiving role, kind of show us what he has there, get a little better as a blocker. If he can stay healthy, I think he's your long-term Hunter Henry replacement. I like targeting him in Dynasty out of all these, day 2 tight ends that came out this year. He's far from a guarantee, but he's a fascinating prospect. So, we'll see where that goes. I don't see much of an impact from him in year 1 necessarily, though. I've mentioned Reggie Gilliam at this point. One of the better overall fullbacks in the league. He's been pretty underutilized in the receiving game, but he's a really good blocker. He's developed in that sense, and good signing there. Wouldn't be stunned if CJ Dippre actually kind of splits with Raritan, because if it is, if it's a big game and you think 12 personnel is your best bet at pounding out these games at the end, you might go to CJ Dippre, who's just got a little bit more of a resume as a run blocker, still a young guy. I don't know that Jack Westover makes the team. He was their fullback last year, kind of being replaced by Gilliam here. Probably looking at Raritan, Gilliam, and Dippre for me. So that's your tight end room. We talked about these backs. I think Travion is still going to get that opportunity as a third down back. He's got to show more as a pass blocker. Would love him to be more dynamic, honestly, as a receiving threat. Stevenson's going to rotate in there in that third down role. He's just a better pass blocker. He's the better screen threat because he's got more of that vision in space. Lets blocks set up a little bit better, but it's still a pretty good 1-2 punch, catching passes out of the backfield at the end of the day. Really nice unit, man. I like what the Patriots did here. Like how they constructed this group over the offseason, and Drake May is definitely going to have more dynamism in this group. I think Dobbs, honestly, can give you something close to what Stephon Diggs gave you. There's a huge similarity in skill set there. You probably trust Diggs a little bit more in big spots in terms of his hands and boxing guys out and making those tough catches. But that's why A.J. Brown's here, right? He's obviously, if you're saying, okay, Dobbs is basically stepping in for Diggs, and then you add A.J. Brown, yeah, that's obviously better than what they had last year. So that's exciting. There is an off chance that A.J. Brown is, regressing and, not in the best shape like he was last year and isn't quite what you were hoping. That's still a good player. Like, even the bad side of A.J. Brown is still going to be an upgrade in that sense in the conversation we just had. You're obviously hoping, though, you can get a couple more years of prime A.J. Brown, which would be incredible here and certainly would cement the Patriots as a top 10 group of pass catchers. So you're liking what you got there. Now let's talk about this offensive line as well, because they made some big additions this offseason. They sign Elijah Vera Tucker over from the New York Jets. A very nice but risky contract there, given his medical history. And then they draft Caleb Lomu as a developmental tackle in the first round. Demetrius Crownover in the sixth round was one of the lowest graded players in my draft guide. Now, they weren't without their losses entirely. They do send Garrett Bradbury to the Bears in a trade because they are going to be sliding Jared Wilson over to center. And then Vidarian Lowe as well leaves in free agency as their swing tackle. Not too much to be concerned about there. So definitely upgraded on the offensive line. I like, the upgrades they made with pass catchers and hopefully with this offensive line are the best things they did this offseason and their biggest ways to kind of combat that regression that we keep calling for here. Now, they're not through the woods yet with this offensive line. And obviously we saw them struggle in the playoffs last year to a very high degree. We can point out some issues with Drake May. I think his issues with pocket presence compounded compounded with issues with a struggling offensive line. But this unit was a contributor to that as well. And their run blocking at times, too, were hard on Travion Henderson at times. There's a lot of times where the run blocking just wasn't good enough. So they need to be better here for sure. They've obviously taken steps to be better. But I'll say this, they're actually not guaranteed to actually be better with this offensive line. They should be. If I had to bet, I would say they will be. But I do not think it's a guarantee. There's actually some risk for even further regression here because Morgan Moses is a regressing 35-year-old right tackle who had missed games in the 2 years before New England signed him. Part of the, I talk about their injury luck was players like Morgan Moses, Carlton Davis at cornerback, and Christian Barmore were all major medical questions heading into last season. None of those guys missed a game. Like, that was a crazy storyline from the Patriots last season. It's hard to imagine that happens again. But you draft Caleb Lomu to replace him. Lomu, I'm going to talk about more in depth as well, but he is a raw young developmental tackle. To expect him to be better than Morgan Moses if he has to play would be a surprise. And Elijah Vera Tucker is your big addition. The dude can't stay healthy. Giving him a big contract is very fun, but it is literally like playing Russian roulette with your offensive line, man. That's what this is. 3 of the last 4 years, he's had season-ending injuries, 2 torn biceps and a torn Achilles. With the loss of Bradbury, if Vera Tucker goes down, and if Morgan Moses, if you don't get what you got from him last year, you could actually be in a worse spot. So there's downside here. I want to get that out of the way, and then we can kind of have the positive, optimistic outlook that this thing can be better. But this is undoubtedly the biggest wild card for this team, needless to say. So with that said, let's go left to right through this group. You got Will Campbell at left tackle, and you'll notice I actually didn't mention Will Campbell as a part of the downside equation, despite the fact that he's all the talk was about coming out of that playoff run was how much he struggled. And it's true, he struggled in the playoffs, coming back early from a torn MCL. It was bad tape. I'm cautious to put too much stock in it at all because it's just we'll never know how injured he was, how much that was the real Will Campbell, how much it wasn't. Look, we have We have his entire we have his rookie season up until like week 14 or whatever it was that he got hurt. It's a lot of tape that we're able to see on him. We have his college eval that I think was very consistent with how he played in those first 14 weeks. Despite everything we saw in the playoffs, essentially, I still feel pretty good about what Will Campbell is and what his projection is. And I'm kind of willing to just set the playoffs aside and be realistic about the rest of it. And for me, Will Campbell to me always projected like a Bernard Raymond, Zach Tom, really good tackle prospect. I did say like I would have taken Armin Membu. I think he's got the traits to be an elite tackle in the NFL that Will Campbell just doesn't have. And there was all the talk about like the arm length. I've praised guys with short arms. It's not that. He does have a noticeable short wingspan, and he doesn't have great play strength. And guys will get up into his chest. He can get overwhelmed. And you can have every other trait at the position like maxed out. You can be a great athlete. You can have great technique. If your play strength and your ability to use that length to get your hands on guys, at the end of the day, you're dealing with the Danielle Hunters of the world and, the Myles Garretts of the world. And at some point, you're just going to be outmatched. And I think we did see from Will Campbell, even before the playoff run, some moments like that as a rookie who still had a really good rookie season as the number 4 overall pick. I think he's going to be a good player. That's what I always felt about him. That's how I feel about him coming out of last season. I haven't seen anything to change that. I don't think he's a guard. I think he's right in line with a Zach Tom, a Luke Gedeke. People want to move those guys inside because they don't have the arm length to play tackle. Well, it doesn't necessarily work like that. If play strength is your concern, it's not going to get better when you go inside. And that's the concern on Will Campbell. In fact, his biggest strength is his quickness and his athleticism on an island at tackle and some of the things you can do with him as a tackle in the run game. I like him as a tackle, and I would keep him there, and I think the Patriots will keep him there. I'm not really entertaining the panic coming out of the playoffs and the idea that he needs to be a guard. That's not where I'm at with him. He's not a big question mark for me. He's a question mark in the sense of like, do we get here 3 years from now and you wish you took Armin Membu instead? Sure. It doesn't make him a liability or horrible draft pick either. And I think he's going to be a pretty damn solid left tackle. And in fact, technique's only going to get better. He's still really young, still love the competitive toughness. And there's room for him to bulk up and add some bit of play strength as well. So I still think he'll get better. I still think he's going to be a good left tackle. Not a imperfect one, not one that will like never take his losses. But I feel pretty good about his projection. Now, left guard, Elijah Vera Tucker's sweet, right? In April or I guess February or March, whenever that signing comes across your ESPN ticker, you love it. You love how he looks on paper here before the season starts. The dude's an ass kicker in the run game. He's gotten better as a pass blocker over the years. He is a genuine like Pro Bowl level talent that if he didn't have this ridiculous injury history where he missed all of last year, stayed healthy in 2024, missed 3/4 of the season in 2023. I think that was the Achilles. In 2022, he missed about the last 2/3 of the season. I think that was the torn biceps. Those could have been flipped. But yeah, like the Jets who needed a guard, let him go for a reason. They can't count on him to stay healthy. And it's almost arrogant for the Patriots to be like, well, hey, Carlton Davis was available for a reason. Morgan Moses was available for a reason. Worked out for us last year. Let's do it again. It's almost arrogant. I like the Russian roulette analogy. This is just, there's no way around it. It's a huge wild card. He is an awesome player. He might be their best offensive lineman if he can stay healthy. And I respect the risk. Mike Vrabel is one of those coaches that kind of operates that way, where he's going to swing big with his team construction, take risks with injuries and with his marriage. But who the hell knows? What we do know is he's healthy right now, right? Like, that's good. So he does look great on paper, but the injury risk with him is definitely factored in. Like, for example, when I'm calculating these positional rankings, like you don't get the full like plug and play Elijah Vera Tucker. You get a slightly nerfed version of that, just trying to bake in some of the injury projection for him. But there's definitely a chance he just stays healthy like he did in 2024, in which case that's great. We'll talk about some of the depth options if he does get hurt, but I want to keep going through the starters here. Jarrett Wilson moving into center is also a wild card. He certainly wasn't perfect in his rookie season, but I think he got better as the year went on. I always really liked his trajectory as a prospect. He was a center at Georgia, so getting to go back to his natural position, if we're ranking how uncertain these wild card players are, I feel pretty damn good about Jarrett Wilson compared to the injury risk on Elijah Vera Tucker. I think with Wilson, the high variance side of things is more of like just how much does he develop in an exciting type of way? Like, does he really take a year 2 leap? And, I think he's got all the tools to be a top 5 to 10 center in the NFL. I do. I really liked the baseline of his traits coming out. So, does he take that big leap? I think we did see a much more consistent player down the stretch from him last year. So there's a lot to like there. But progression's not always linear. So if he just gets a little bit better and has some of those more, ugly games that he had some bad games in pass pro last year. And as a run blocker especially, you have to bring up, he just did kind of struggle to connect and find his blocks at guard last year. That's where you especially would love to see him take leaps as kind of the field general of your run game. That's where I'm especially I guess worried or keeping my eyes on is what do you get from him as a run blocker? Mike Onwenu at right guard, pretty short conversation, big, stout, consistent, balanced guard. Top 10 has kind of consistently been around that mark for me. Nothing more, nothing less. He's awesome. Not the most superb athlete. It's about the biggest knock you could have on a man who is very big. And then we kind of talked about Morgan Moses a little bit, but there's real reason to believe that you got a little lucky with what you got out of Morgan Moses last year. I've always loved Morgan Moses. He has defied time to this point, still played really well into his age 35 season. You definitely did see when he gets left on an island against athletic pass rushers, you can see the age and things can fall off in a hurry. He's also a guy that missed time in the 2 seasons prior to him coming to New England, which can tend to happen for 35-year-old offensive linemen playing in the NFL. So he's still a really good right tackle, despite some of the uglier moments that he had scattered throughout the season. He still had a very stable season of pass protection at large, and he is still a nasty, not just strong, but extremely instinctive, high IQ run blocker. You're really hoping you can count on another year from him because their first round pick, I really like the draft pick of Caleb Lomu. You were low in the first round. There was a steep drop off in tackle prospects after him. With what we said about Morgan Moses and what we've discussed about Drake May's dip in play when his offensive line isn't as good due to Drake May's pocket presence maybe being his weakest trait, investing in the future of this offensive line was paramount. And I love that they went this route with how the board fell for them. Lomu was a top 50 player for me, not a true first round grade. Again, I think this is the exact pick I would have made, but you're really praying Morgan Moses can stay healthy because Lomu needs to bulk up. He just has inconsistent moments with his hands and his feet. But the baseline with him was okay, he's been on a positive trajectory, and they only make so many human beings that have the traits to be franchise tackles, where you have the requisite length, the frame to fill out and have play strength, but he does need to fill it out, and the athleticism to have both the range in your kick slides to deal with athletes on an island and the agility to cut off inside counters. There's benchmarks that you're looking for in a potential franchise tackle. And that's what, like, Will Campbell didn't hit all those benchmarks. That's why there was some question marks on the upside with him. You don't have like those types of questions on Caleb Lomu, but what he's lacking is the technique and the experience of like a Will Campbell. So, if he had to play, and by the way, Utah's run system was hard to watch that final year. It was like all RPOs. It impacted him, and it impacted Fano as well. Just not letting these guys be nasty and get upfield. So I wouldn't be stunned if he was like better than we got to see him last year at Utah. I wouldn't be surprised if he was better right away as a run blocker. But yeah, the pass protection, like, I don't think he's going to be as good as Morgan Moses if he's got to play right away. Maybe he surprises. It can happen, but that would be a lot to ask. I love the long-term projection. I love how if Moses can stay healthy, you have an easy transition with a redshirt season on Lomu. If he had to play, he's still probably better than like your Marcus Bryant and James Hudsons of the world, and especially Demetrius Crownover, which I didn't have a draftable grade on him. I think he's broken beyond repair. He's got traits, but his traits aren't that good that you need to be an asshole to your offensive line coach and say, here, fix this guy. Like, yikes. At least he didn't go in the third round like some projections had him. I guess why not in the sixth round? But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there with that right tackle spot. And then your interior offensive line depth. You do have Ben Brown, who is a decent backup interior offensive lineman as far as backup O-line are considered. He started a lot of games. If and when Vera Tucker gets hurt, it's a nice piece of flex tape to throw on there, but he's not Elijah Vera Tucker, obviously. And he will take his losses, but decent enough depth there. And I'm still Caden Wallace curious. He was a tackle, third round pick coming out that definitely always projected as more of a guard. They don't seem to love him all that much, but I still think there could be something there. He's a big, nasty, high play strength kind of guy. Not much depth, at least of the proven variety beyond that. But a couple of pieces that you feel decent enough in Ben Brown and Caleb Lomu is still probably above average offensive line depth. So I didn't mention it, but they came out as my 21st ranked offensive line with a massive sliding scale. If Campbell takes a little step, Vera Tucker stays healthy, if Jared Wilson becomes maybe a top 15 center this season, Morgan Moses plays well again at 35 years old, that's probably pushing top 10 for offensive line. Almost certainly is. You run into some of these red lights we've projected as a possibility, you're going to look a little closer to what that Super Bowl offensive line looked like. Potential problem spots in three areas. If Vera Tucker's not out there, Jared Wilson is inconsistent, and you've got a rookie Caleb Lomu out there, it could potentially hold this team season back. So that's why we highlight these wildcard units. Helps prepare us for some of the bigger spots of what could go right and what could go wrong for these teams. And that is definitely the definition of this offensive line. So let's tie this offense all together. The Patriots actually came out as my 15th ranked offense, which surprised me where the formula kind of spit them out there. There's a lot of high-ranking offenses this year. Now, their pass game did rank 8th, so that makes a lot more sense. But their run game was a little bit lower, 19th for run game, which, yeah, obviously kind of pulled down the total offense. But I think you'll still take a top 8 passing game and a still very solid run game. And I think this offense has obvious top 10 potential. They were a top 10 offense in the regular season last year, despite looking unwatchable at times in those playoffs. But yeah, if the offensive line can hit those green lights, I mean, yeah, you're going to be a top 10 offense this year without even really blinking. I think that's really what it comes down to. And I don't think that's overly controversial to say either. But with that, let's flip over to this Patriots defense and discuss potentially what sort of support they're going to be getting from the other side of the ball this year. And we'll begin up in the trenches while we take a look at their offseason changes at interior and edge defensive linemen. So they do have some losses, right? They lose Kyrus Tonga to a decent free agent contract to the Chiefs. definitely interesting when they don't really add anybody, when he was more of their nose tackle piece around some, more lighter pass rush oriented starters on the D-line. So I did say slightly downgraded at interior of the defensive line, and then at edge as well. I'm not going to say Caleb Chason's a superstar, and I agree a lot of his production was more manufactured, just tapping into that athletic twitch on stunts and contain rush and stuff. But 74 pressures is still a lot. That was tied for 11th in pressures in the NFL. I mean, to call that a moderate loss is probably conservative. Like that's a piece no longer on this D-line, as is Anthony Jennings, who did play a third of their snaps last year and continued to be that stout, heavy-handed on-ball linebacker. They weren't without some additions, though. They do pick up Draymond Jones to a pretty nice free agent contract after a nice kind of reemergence in Baltimore last year. They draft Gabe Akis in the second round out of Illinois. And then Quintavion Hutchins as well, 7th rounder out of Boston College, lower expectations there. But I do say slightly upgraded as you compare that trifecta, if you will, to the losses there of Chason and Jennings. Nothing overwhelming, but all progress is good progress, I suppose. So where does that leave us now with this D-line as we head into the start of the season? Well, I have them ranked as the 22nd overall defensive line, 19th to 22nd in pass rush, and 22nd to 25th in D-line run defense. So certainly not a bad defensive line, but certainly not a standout unit either. And the other thing, too, is I largely think this is what they're going to be. There's a couple variables that could go one way or another here. But I don't think they're going to swing too far in any direction, whether it's up arrows or down arrows. I kind of feel like this is where the Patriots D-line is probably at and what they're going to have to work with here. They signed Draymond Jones in free agency. I like the signing. He had a really good year in Baltimore once he left Tennessee last year. He actually was never with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, but I guess follows the same path as Vrabel. Going from Tennessee to a short stint in the AFC North to then the Patriots. But I did put the yellow arrow on Draymond Jones because he's spent the better part of 3 years as a pretty nice number 3 piece with some size and some power and really good get off and athleticism for a guy his size, but it never really put it together. Has certainly never put his size to consistent good use as a heavy-handed edge defender. I'm curious if Mike Vrabel can get something out of him there that we haven't seen in the past. But when he did get to New England last year, I mean, he's pulling off all these fancy rush moves. There was a moment after they traded for him watching the Ravens, and I was just like, wait, who the hell is number 41? I didn't realize it was Draymond Jones that took that number, but he really was standing out. And I put a 78 rush rating on him, which is their best edge rusher on paper to me right now. But I think he played actually above that in the half a season with Baltimore, which was honestly the first time in a long time, if ever, that I've felt like Draymond Jones is more of a legit, impact. Call him a quality number 2 piece. And if he really did figure something out and you're getting that version of him, I think you even got him on a bargain coming over here because he really had become a bit of a journeyman, decent piece until, Baltimore has a pretty good record of guys like this kind of reemerging in Baltimore. So, we'll see just what level they get from him. I think if he goes back to really what he was early last season and the 3 years before that, he's a decent piece. He's not going to hurt you. He'll get you some pressures and some impact on stunts and probably a slight overpay if that's what he is. If you get what he was in Baltimore last year, he's actually going to make a decent impact here and leave you feeling a lot better about this pass rush because the edge room beyond him is a legitimate concern for me. And I know last year I questioned the Harold Landry signing, and I had some apologies to make. He looked, like he was back in shape and beating guys off the edge and, back with Mike Vrabel looking good. And then about week 8 hit and we saw the version of Harold Landry that I was afraid of, when they paid him significant money to come over here. From week 9 onward, Harold Landry was 87th out of 109 eligible pass rushers in true pass set win rate. He was 106th out of 116 edge rushers in overall PFF rush grade. Say whatever you got to say about PFF. I've always defended their pass rush grades are the best they have, and they are very consistently reflective of what you see on the tape and projecting future performance as well. He fell off. He went back to what he had done in Tennessee when they needed edge rushers and they cut him, right? And maybe this is a player that like he's better to start the year and then the season grind wears on him. To his credit, he is still an extremely high motor player that gets way more out of his undersized physical build as a run defender, and that's an impact. I can't take that away from him. It's nice that he gives you something on earlier downs, but for a team looking for some juice off the edge to get after the quarterback, I'm extremely skeptical that Harold Landry is going to give you that, especially beyond like week 5. Like maybe it's a repeat of last year at best, but at this point, he's a guy that has always won thanks to his rare bend in athletic ability, getting up there in age, and having endured some pretty serious injuries in Tennessee. I do have a hard time projecting him to make a big impact here. Sticking with the edge group beyond that, they draft Gabe Akis in the 2nd round, and I'm not trying to stay overly negative here or anything like that, but this is a player that did have some big fans in the draft and from other analysts that I like deeply respect their opinion on, and that's the beauty of the draft is some people just see different players differently. And Akis got some like late 1st, early 2nd round buzz. To me, he really screamed like a traditional 3rd round edge rush prospect where he's kind of good at everything. He's got good size. He plays the run with effort, but not dominant play strength considering his size. Someone that just, to be a high-end pass rusher at the next level, I want to see something that you do at a high level to project you to have high efficiency at the NFL level against NFL tackles. And there's really nothing with Gabe Akis from a pass rushing standpoint that wows you. He's crafty. He's got pretty quick feet for a bigger guy. He's got decent power. Honestly, my high-end pro comp on him was Kwity Paye, also out of the Big Ten, but someone with pretty similar traits with everything we just described. And Kwity Paye, if he was never drafted in the 1st round, I'll just say this, he sure as hell is not getting a $15 million a year contract from the Raiders. He's a decent 3rd edge, and that's like a best case for Gabe Akis. If you get Kwity Paye here, and I think it's possible that happens in year 1 because I think he's relatively maxed out. There's not a ton to really work on. It's just he's got to prove it at the next level. If you get that, and I think it's possible, it helps. That's why there's a green up arrow on him. It's not going to change the landscape of everything, but it gives you a really nice number 3 type of edge that can play all 3 downs and survive, essentially. Maybe the player that interests me the most beyond Draymond Jones is actually Elijah Ponder, really freak athlete coming out. He's got size. Went in and watched the tape on him because he had some pretty interesting games from a production standpoint, and there's something there. Man, he's listed at 6'3", 245. To me, he looks like he's bulked up. Like he reminds me a little bit more like a Yaya Diaby, more of these like explosive but thick rushers. I'm curious where he really comes in there, but he's got pop in his hands. I kind of like that. That just hit me on the top of my head, but I kind of like the Yaya Diaby, like best case scenario, who's a good like number 2 piece. Was a undrafted pickup out of Cal Poly, but a freak tester. There's some intrigue there. I don't think he really has much of a pass rush like tool belt, if you will. He's kind of just flying off the ball, playing high energy, using the bull rush, trying to get after it. If he can start to stem some moves together and develop more of a skill set, use some of that, if he's potentially bulked up and now playing at a new weight that he maybe wasn't at Cal Poly, use that new rediscovered play strength to be a more consistent run defender. As far as undrafted free agents go, he's really intriguing. And I actually think his upside is higher than Gabe Akis. Edge 3, edge 4, it's okay with some upside. It's more the starters that concern me. You got 7th round pick Contavious Hutchins. Feels like you were maybe throwing a local kid a bone. undersized guy that I think even had off-field concerns. Sorry if I'm wrong about that and putting it on a guy unfairly, but I'm pretty certain. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to look it up just to be sure. There was a domestic violence misdemeanor arrest at the Boston College campus. So you put that on top of a guy that's already undersized and relatively unathletic for an undersized guy that wasn't a crazy guy on tape. I was just a little surprised he did get drafted. So I'd be surprised likewise if he was a big contributor. Braden Swinson was another guy that had some just like football character concerns. So something Bill Belichick talked a lot about, like the difference between football character and off-field character. Football character being like, are you listening to coaches? Do you show up on time? Do you put in all the work ethic? Like there was a lot of questions about that kind of stuff with Braden Swinson, but he had some good tape at LSU to maybe be a decent rotational defensive lineman someday. So maybe something clicks there. But yeah, to me, I see it as a 4-man edge group, and a 4-man edge group that's realistically one of the worst edge rooms in the league, if we're just being honest about it. Now, the interior of the D-line picks you up from that. You've got Milton Williams, was an awesome signing. Really good job by this front office to hammer that contract home after he had basically soft committed. If this were college football, soft committed to Carolina, and then Patriots throw him a little bit more money, and that was the difference between getting Milton Williams and Tershawn Wharton. Huge sliding doors moment in the offseason, and very well might have changed the outlook for the Patriots. I mean, it definitely did. I mean, he was on fire in the playoffs. It's hard to say they don't go to the Super Bowl without him, but this defense was what drove them to the Super Bowl. And Milton Williams, outside of maybe Christian Gonzalez, but even then, Milton Williams was the best player on the defense for them. And just his combination of athleticism paired with the power that he's added to his game, it's pretty special. And I'm pretty close to basically upgrading what tier he comes in at as a rusher. The line for my color coding system and the tiering system is an 85 grade to an 86. I got him right on that border. Honestly, I thought he played his best ball in the playoffs and was also really good in the regular season, but really turned it on down the stretch. If that now is what we're going to get from Milton Williams for a full season, we're going to be talking about Milton Williams in an even bigger light as one of the best pass rushing interior D linemen in the league. So you could even argue for an up arrow on him. But yeah, he's a menace on the inside. So he's the best thing they have. He's what still gets them sniffing top 20 for pass rush, honestly, is largely him. Now, he's a good run defender. He's a player that, if you look at the PFF grades, for example, he's gonna have a hard time grading out super high as a run defender because he is undersized. And the way those grading systems work is if you've got negative plays, if you go backwards, you're going to get some negatively graded plays. And that's going to happen to Milton Williams. But he has some really good moments too because of his athleticism where he can penetrate, he can muddy things up and complicate things for the run game just with his leverage and get off. So, I wish you still had Kyrus Tonga there to eat up space and open things up for a Milton Williams. We'll get to some of these depth pieces, and if they can step into that nose tackle role, you can't ask Milton Williams to fill that role, but he is an impact as a run defender. And then you have Christian Barmore is kind of a similar player, just tuned down a little bit. Barmore was a big question last year, how good was he going to be? How much was he going to be able to stay healthy? He had it was a back injury, right? That was just kind of up in the air with him. And it was a big reason they signed Milton Williams was uncertainty with Christian Barmore, and he didn't miss a game. Now I think he's looked better in years past. And especially I feel there weren't really those takeover games from Christian Barmore that he maybe had going back to 2022, 2023, where he looked more like the best player on the field at times. He was more of just a kind of steady presence as an athlete with some get off and a bull rush. They run a ton of loops and stunts, and his athleticism will play up front. I think he's still a good number 2 compliment on the inside as a rusher. The run defense, he's a taller DT. He can let the pads come up and have some negative plays, but he is strong in his hands and can get off blocks. He's not a complete liability there either. So it is one of the better 1-2 punches for interior D linemen in the league, and that is definitely doing the majority of the heavy lifting to get this up to be basically get them away from being a bottom third defensive line in the league, again, where they came in 22nd overall. Now, as far as interior D-line depth, you do have a handful of fascinating names. Corey Durden's a good player. He broke out last year at like age 27, going on 28. Big, compact, power rusher, just to muddy stuff up. Was a fun player to get through his pressures. I feel like he probably is what he is. Like, there's not a ton of technique. He's not a great run defender. But as a third piece to come in when you need guys to get a break, or you want to go with extra, D linemen out there, whatever you got to do, he's definitely a nice piece that can help out this pass rush, especially on stunts and stuff. Like, if you want that sledgehammer to just blow shit up, and then you got an athletic, Harold Landry or Milton Williams to loop in behind that, that'll play, and did play last year. Joshua Farmer, I think, is a guy to keep an eye on in the Khyiris Tonga replacement. I liked his tape coming out just as a stocky potential nose tackle. 4th round pick last year, up and down tape. Big year 2 for him to kind of take that leap with NFL coaching, with a bigger opportunity with Khyiris Tonga gone. I think there's something there, but year 1 there was really only flashes of him making an impact as a run defender. Eric Gregory was probably actually better, undrafted pickup the year before. Pretty decent run defender as a rotational piece if Farmer struggles. Gregory, you could technically do worse. I don't know that either of these guys are going to be Khyiris Tonga, but they're going to ask those guys, I think, to play that role, or maybe Corey Durden takes a step there too. Durden's only listed at 305 pounds. He looks a little bit thicker than that, but again, he's more of a like north and south sledgehammer than he is a hold the line nose tackle like Khyiris Tonga. I think Farmer and Gregory will likely be pegged in that role. Leonard Taylor is still fascinating to me. He was super young coming out. Had some questions about just, I think probably more like, Braden Swinson football character type of concerns, like super highly recruited guy, Leonard Taylor, that just never took a step forward, came out relatively young, and, the Jets moved on from him. Got some snaps here with the Patriots. I think he's talented. I always liked his ability to get off blocks and his athleticism at his size. So, if they can tap into that and get him to get better, there could be something there. Jeremiah Farms showed some flashes in 2024 and had a bit of a falling out with the new staff coming in. So you do have like decent depth. I don't hate this depth. There's nothing's like overly proven, especially from a run defense standpoint. But there are teams that have much worse interior D-line depth than that. So it's overall like a pretty solid D-line that I think just is lacking upside on the edge overall. I think they're going to have a pretty hard time jumping up and being much better than like the 20th best D-line in the league. I really do. I think this is a portion of this team when you talk about like, okay, did they maybe overachieve a little bit last year? Did they exceed expectations based on their roster talent? As a big D-line guy myself, I think this is a group that we might get to the end of the year and they're seeking a big addition with this group, whether that's early in the draft or through free agency, whatever it might be. I don't think it's a D-line that'll cripple them either, but definitely a unit that I think is gonna, when you have a weaker D-line, it forces you to scheme around it. Stunts, loops, blitzes, be more creative. It's really nice to just line up for and win if you're a defensive coordinator. But that's where the Mike Vrabel effect comes in for sure, because he is a good defensive coach that can help that situation out. All right, let's go to linebacker. As far as their offseason changes, there are some moving names here, but I did say neutral as far as whether they got better or worse. They lose Jack Gibbons, who is a good run defender that played half their snaps last year. Moderate loss, but nothing overly concerning. Jelani Tavai had really fallen off here as well. They say goodbye to him. They bring in the veteran KJ Britt, and they draft Nnamdi Abiazor out of TCU in the 6th round. But they're moving forward with their starters of Robert Spillane and Christian Ellis. I think it's a really solid group. They came out as my 17th ranked linebacking core, top half in the league for run defense, so 11th to 14th there, and better in that category than in coverage where they're 19th to 24th. I think we can keep this conversation honestly pretty quick, like really quick. I don't really have big takes here. Robert Spillane's a really good linebacker. They kind of stole him from the Raiders and they immediately missed him. He's a high IQ, nasty run defender who unfortunately just misses a few too many tackles for your liking. He's not a special athlete. So when he gets faced up with these incredible athletes that he sees at the NFL level, he can get out-athleted at the tackle point. So that can hold him back a little bit. He's not a crazy explosive blitzer or anything like that. He's got IQ and coverage, but he's going to be more limited without that lack of traits. But, he maximizes his skill set. He's somewhere between a top, 11 to 15 linebacker in the league. He's a really good player. You got Christian Ellis, who's developed nicely here. Good bloodlines. He's got three brothers that have made it to the NFL, and he's carved out a nice resume at this point as a starting linebacker. He was kind of in the mix last year with someone like Jack Gibbons after kind of coming off a breakout 2024 campaign. But I think they saw enough as the year went on to be like, no, like this is clicking. You've now shown 2 years of starting caliber play. There's some missed tackles in there. He missed over 15% of his tackles last year. He's not going to be always perfect necessarily, but he's a good balanced linebacker in his own right. He is a good athlete. He's got decent length. I'm not even going to rule out the idea that he could even continue to get better and maybe even have the up arrow on him. I don't know that that's super reasonable to predict or anything, but year 5, year 6, I'm not going to say it's the average breakout age for linebackers, but there's certainly your fair share of later career breakouts. So he's a nice player. The floor is nice, and there might be some extra ceiling in there in a dream scenario. But you put these two together, and you don't really see many holes. You're not going to get off the bus and be like, oh God, we got to deal with Robert Spillane and Christian Ellis today. It's not that kind of unit, but it definitely sets the floor in the middle of the defense, and they kind of allow you to do whatever you got to do, schematically speaking, coverage-wise, blitz-wise, man, zone, you name it. You do have KJ Britt. He's kind of the classic Belichick thumper. Feels like there's always been a guy like this on the roster. Jelani Tavai out, KJ Britt in. He's exactly what you would expect. A sawed-off shotgun of a linebacker that will get in your face, loves to take on blocks and hit, can't pick up his feet and change directions to save his life. Not a great blitzer because he's just not athletic, and a complete and utter liability in coverage. But if you want to put him in there in a base 4-3, put him on the line, have him take on the center and the A gap. You can do some stuff with him if you want to as a run defender. Nnamdi Abiazor is kind of a classic trade-based developmental linebacker that played at a kind of a weird outside backer 3-3-5 system at TCU. So he's got a lot to learn, but he can run. We'll play special teams for you in the meantime. Decent enough use of a 6th-round pick. Chad Muma, once upon a time, I want to say the 1st or 2nd pick in the 3rd round for the Jags. Has traits, but just hasn't put it together as well. But as a 5th linebacker to round out your group, sure, we'll throw Chad Muma in there and see if something clicks. But yeah, good linebacker room. I don't have much to say beyond that. And I'd be a little bit surprised if Patriots fans came out and said I'm either too high or too low in this group. I think it's pretty straightforward. But let's go to the secondary here. Essentially no change at cornerback. Alex Austin out. 5th round developmental project in Kayron Prunty in. And then at safety, they did not retain Jalen Hawkins, which was interesting. Felt like that was a really good fit. You had a California Golden Bears duo, a player that Atlanta, frankly, probably gave up on too soon, and now you're giving up on him. It's not like you got a ton of money to go to Baltimore, and your bet is to kind of go with. I'll just say it. I don't love this. You're going with the nepotism, Mike Vrabel. Oh, Kevin Byard's out there. I loved coaching Kevin Byard 4 years ago. Let's bring him in. When in reality, that's probably not what's best. Byard did have a great year last year. I'm not going to be so harsh to call this a downgrade, because there's definitely a world where Kevin Byard, plays well and outplays Jalen Hawkins. But it was interesting to me. That to me was the one swap where I was like, I probably would have taken the controller away from Mike Vrabel on that one. But hopefully not going to be the end of the world, and Jalen Hawkins doesn't keep it up in Baltimore, because he really did play well last year. But all that to say, it's not like they needed to do much in this secondary. They come out as my second-ranked secondary in the NFL and is the defining strength of this defense. It's an almost perfectly crafted group with minor question marks. Everybody makes sense here. You got Christian Gonzalez, is at worst the third best cornerback in the NFL and at best number one. He is your built in a lab, height, weight, speed, yes, but also elite, oily hips, change of direction. He's high IQ. He can play zone. He's got ball skills. He can absolutely man you up. What's left to say about Christian Gonzalez? We all saw him in the Super Bowl doing everything he could to keep that team in the game. But one player, and certainly a cornerback, can only do so much. But he's awesome. I love Christian Gonzalez. My intro to last year's deep dive, in fact, was if I see one more top 10 cornerbacks list without Christian Gonzalez on it, I'm going to freak out. It's funny to think that needed to be said heading into last year. But he cemented himself as an elite player and honestly just like one of the better non-quarterbacks in the NFL, and going to get an absolute bag very soon. Oh, and it goes without saying, too, one of the most just obvious draft falls in recent memory. Like him, Reuben Bain, Derwin James, very memorable that so many teams passed on him for no good reason. So you start there, a decent starting point, I would say. Honestly, your CB2 here is, I would say, your biggest question mark, because I mentioned this earlier, but the fact that the Patriots got 21 games out of Carlton Davis out of absolutely nowhere last year was pretty crazy. Davis has consistently been a guy that is really good when he plays. He's a long, strong, physical corner that is nasty against the run, would be a number one corner on a lot of teams, honestly. He's kind of in that low end 1, high end 2 category. So for him to just be plug and play opposite of Christian Gonzalez, that's a core reason how you end up the number 2 ranked secondary. The reality is, like, the probability based on his career, and this is a position that does get banged up. I'm sorry, Patriots fans, but like, it was lucky that you got as many games out of him as you did. So history with him and why he was available to begin with is like, he's going to miss 5 or 6 games, and you're hoping that those aren't playoff games on top of that. Now, hopefully he can stay healthy, and that's not the case. He was still really good when he played, though. And it's not like he's a risk to go down for the whole year or anything like that. It's more of like, if he gets hurt, how is the timing of those injuries? Like, if he's got to get hurt, can it be week 4 through 10, and then get him back down the stretch? And Patriots fans watching this, having 1 year of sample size of Carlton Davis staying healthy, are like, wow, you're such a hater. Well, Bucks fans and Lions fans watching this are watching this like, what the hell? Why couldn't we get a season of over almost 1,200 snaps from Carlton Davis? He's been in the league for 8 years. He's missed at least 4 games in 5 of those 8 seasons. And he's missed time in 6 of those 8 seasons. The only time he made it through a season without missing time was last year and 2020. So if he's going to get hurt, I will say this: their lack of cornerback depth is interesting when you have such an injury-prone CB2. It's a little bit Russian roulette, stubborn, Mike Vrabel, no risk it, no biscuit. If we're just talking about ways that things can get off track here with the Patriots, I think it's a realistic conversation to have here. Charles Wood's very unproven. Kindle Vildor's proven, but he's proven us what he is, and that's just a streaky, undersized corner that's largely bad. Can make a couple plays from time to time. You got a athletic guy in Kieran Prudy that was off the draft radar, but I'll admit, like, he looks interesting to me in terms of the traits, but very much like unproven, and got to show us something if he's going to play in his rookie season. Kobe Minor's kind of a special teamer. Marcus Jones is your slot corner. Really not someone you want to count on the outside. And even if you do that, you're going to add questions into your slot position. I'm quite surprised that the Patriots wouldn't like go get some depth at corner. And maybe they do. Maybe this is a cry out to go get even like, okay, Marshawn Lattimore, Trayvon Diggs. Is there a trade out there that makes sense? Just somebody that can be a little bit more of an insurance plan would make me feel much better about the potential downside, like the floor. But still largely optimistic with Davis at CB2. Marcus Jones, a really fun slot corner. He's not perfect. Like, you do see the size impact his upside, and this was the same thing I said about like D'Angelo Ponds, who's a second-round pick for the Jets, where it's like, look, man, you can be as athletic as hell and high IQ and scrappy. The margins for error at this position are so small that extra like foot between your height and your lack of length, that extra foot to like get in the way of passing lanes, to contest passes, the shorter strides when you get stuck like burning deep, it all adds up, and it's just going to show up in little spots and lead to some uglier games, some uglier moments. But man, he is frisky. He can play man. He can play zone. He's got incredible ball skills. He's feisty as hell against the run. He as well has got to stay healthy. This is another guy that's been on and off and on and off the field for the first 3 years of his career. And that the magic of last season, he played all 21 games. So between him and Carlton Davis, like, you are definitely worried about cornerback injury plus a lack of cornerback depth would be what could really throw this defense off when the secondary is the strength. But yeah, Marcus Jones, really fun player. We'll get to talk about him in a second too as a returner, where he's phenomenal, returning punts. And then you got this safety duo. I'm going to start with Craig Woodson. Rookie year last year, really encouraging young safety, was an explosive playmaking safety out of California, really passed the test in terms of tackling and run defense. That was really good to see. A really good rookie season for a safety. Wasn't like an all-pro year, wasn't shutting dudes down and, being perfect coverage every week. But man, he could very well be a like high-end do-it-all safety, whatever that means to you. Pro Bowl, all-pro feels like probably a stretch, but like once upon a time, Kevin Byard turned into that player as a third-round pick for Mike Vrabel. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but he's really sweet. Outside of your typical like things you would say about a rookie D-back, that like he's just going to have some stuff to clean up. Like, he was credited with 6 touchdowns allowed, for example. Like, it's damn near impossible to come in and just be an all-pro right away. But yeah, he's really nice, balanced safety. Kevin Byard, on the other hand, I'm curious to see how he plays this year. I am. Very polarizing conversation with him, because I don't want to take away like his IQ on the back end has reached such a high point where like he was like baiting quarterbacks. His zone IQ is about as good as it gets for any safety in the league. And he had a 7 interception season last year. And I'm not even going to sit here and say he can't repeat that. Obviously, interceptions are very dependent on the quarterback you're facing, and oftentimes luck, or just good timing, good fortune. But the underlying play for Kevin Byard, you do see... You see the age, you see like why the Bears wanted to move on and like weren't really betting on him to repeat that performance. His range on the back end is a concern, especially chasing down plays in run support. When you're that last line of defense and you have got to win to the corner or it's going to be a touchdown, Kevin Byard has had his fair share of plays last year and even before that with the Eagles, when the Eagles moved on from him, where it's like, he's a limited version of his old self. He really is. You love the leadership and the playmaking ability, and when he's in the right place, he's a great tackler. But you'll see weeks too where like the missed tackles creep up on him because he's just out of position. So he's kind of this like min-maxed safety on the back end right now. where the IQ and the awareness and the leadership are like maxed out, but the physical tools, the speed, the range, the foot speed, agility to like, mirror route breaks and square up at the tackle point, it's much more limited. So the arrow's pointing down. It's just a matter of how much down does it point. He turns 33 here right around the start of the season. He's on a razor's edge of regression, I think. So I would have rather kept the cool looking, athletic, young, Jalen Hawkins, relatively young California duo that was working so well last year. I would have kept that together if it was me running the team. I think there's a chance Kevin Byard doesn't play horribly, but has some games that does hurt you on the back end. Hoping it's not the end of the world, though. You do have some interesting safety depth. Both Del Pettis and Mike Brown are like big, thumping, undrafted box safety types. I think there is potential to run 3 safety stuff, or if Marcus Jones gets hurt, you want to do, you're in the Belichick family here. So if you want to take a page out of Brian Flores's book, like I think both Del Pettis and Mike Brown are kind of in that Josh Metellus mold. So that would probably be like if you have a cornerback injury, either it's Marcus Jones in the slot, or if Davis gets hurt, you want Jones to step outside. It could be an option. I think those guys could do that, but that would require, a little bit of out of the box thinking, which I think they could do, but I don't think we've necessarily seen that here. Brandon Schooler's kind of a vintage special teamer here at this point. So it's an excellent secondary here. Really, the only concern is going to be the health on those 2 corners. I guess you could call Byard a concern, but even them ranking as this second-ranked secondary, that's still baking in everything I said about Kevin Byard, if that makes sense. That's more of just like you maybe take the good with the bad with him. But let's round out this defense as a whole. So they came out actually as a higher placed defense than the offense, which is a surprise if you watch the Patriots last year. Although, to be fair, in the playoffs, they were much more of a defensive-minded team. So perhaps some of that is bleeding through here. But if you look at the number ratings for the formula, as we get pretty mathy here, the offense still has a higher overall rating than the defense. It's just there's more good offenses than defenses. So the defense, which is also pretty good, just came in higher. But yeah, 9th projection on defense, 9th for pass defense, 15th for run defense. So as you would hope for in a Mike Vrabel defense, a lot of balance and flexibility, a lack of superstar talent in your front being kind of the limiting factor there. Everything else being pretty damn good. And just a little note there for those following the series very closely. And I should shout out 1235's, a member of the community here, is building a spreadsheet that tracks all this, individual player ratings and everything. That's free and available in the description below. I've done a really bad job promoting that, but it is there. But yeah, for those really monitoring these ratings, there's going to be some subtle tweaks that show up. I put all these ratings together in May, and then as we go through the series, sometimes I'll see something different. Sometimes an injury will happen. Sometimes I get to the team and I'm like, wait, I think I rated it a little bit too high 2 months ago. So given the scale of the series, naturally some of those little adjustments are going to happen. A little bit of a behind the curtain here. I had the linebacker run defense rating a tier higher than this, and it just felt too high. That came down a little bit, and that lowered the Patriots defense below Tampa Bay. So Tampa Bay climbs to 8 for defense. Patriots land at 9th. And also I will say, obviously Fives is doing a great job putting the spreadsheet together, but I will be posting my official spreadsheet for free on my Patreon when the series concludes as well. So you can follow up on everything as well. So anyway, to get back on track with the Patriots here, let's finish up and take a look at their special teams. We'll summarize their strengths and weaknesses, and then roll the interview with Aaron Schatz before coming back with my final predictions on this team. But really no change with special teams, so staying neutral as far as offseason changes. But as we look at my own special teams formula there, which does include the DVOA special teams grade, which I ask our guest a little bit about what goes into that here in just a second, because he's the creator of DVOA. Aaron Schatz, but they came in 20th there, 15th for PFF team grades, so pretty solid in terms of their success last year, but nothing special. You do have some relative concerns like Andy Borregales, Bryce Baringer, neither like liabilities, but neither have graded out particularly well. You do have a phenomenal punt returner here who is going to help out. Marcus Jones is just crazy with the ball in his hands. Marcus Jones walked so that Travis Hunter could run. Am I right? Marcus Jones was once upon a time getting jet sweeps in this offense. But yeah, special athlete for sure. And then you've got like a handful of like Travion Henderson, who is theoretically a good kick returner, but outside of the kick return in the preseason, wasn't able to translate that to the regular season. Kyle Williams, Efton Chisholm, those guys are doing the kicks for you. You got some potential there for sure, but nothing has fully come to the surface in terms of results there. But they came out as the 18th ranked special teams. They should be pretty solid there. I feel like that's an area that Mike Vrabel kind of gets. Not that he's a special teams coach or anything, but it feels like his influence tends to lead to good special teams, which has always been valued here in New England. But yeah, let's summarize some things here before we get to the interview with Aaron. So again, they came in 15th on offense, 9th on defense, but they did come out higher rated on offense just with the formula there. But overall, like really balanced, our 12th overall team. And as we look at my Venn diagram for strengths, weaknesses, and pivotal factors, this is where it gets fun. Like some of these teams are just so different. We did the Packers last, and that wild cards category was like, oh my God, like this team could be amazing or it could fall off the rails. Like there's so much variance, so many pivotal factors. Honestly, the Patriots for me, very different when you really break it down. Like to me, there's not a lot of units that either have a ton of upside, but also not a ton of downside. Like they actually have no definitive weaknesses to me, which is great. The one aspect of this team that has a lot of variance is the offensive line, where it could be a top 10 unit for the reasons we broke down. If Vera Tucker stays healthy and he gets some development and Morgan Moses doesn't fall off a cliff or get hurt, top 10. If those things don't happen and Vera Tucker does get hurt, we saw this O-line in the Super Bowl last year. It's just that without Garrett Bradbury. That'd be a problem. They do have some real strengths, though. Quarterback, for sure, with Drake May. I do say weapons is a strength. There's a little bit of a wild card factor there with A.J. Brown, but I'm pretty damn optimistic on the A.J. Brown thing. And even if A.J. Brown is what he was last year, I think that's still a strength of the team, or at least an above average unit. Secondary is definitely a strength. And then I would say the combination, like just Mike Vrabel, the head coach / defensive coaching, is a strength, a big asset for this team. Like everything Mike Vrabel brings to the table, I would say, is a strength. I think I will actually, like, while we're looking at this, I think cornerback health, it should be a wild card. It should. If we're really looking at this and like what could go wrong, what could derail this team, that's realistic. Marcus Jones and Carlton Davis played every game last year. That is historically improbable, and they don't have depth right now. So I think I'm going to add that in as a pretty important note on this team as well. But we are not done here. It's time to welcome a new guest here, Aaron Schatz, writer for ESPN and the father of DVOA, something I've been referencing in this series for years. A very bright mind with a different perspective on this Patriots team. So we're going to roll the interview here, and then when I come back, we will look at the schedule, and I will give you my official predictions for how many games I think the Patriots win this year, and we'll do some superlative awards as well to round things out. And now I'm thrilled to welcome Aaron Schatz, the developer, the father developer of DVOA, a writer at ESPN, and also the lead analyst over at FTN. Thank you for doing this, Aaron. How you doing?
Hey, I'm good, man. It's good to be on with you.
Absolutely. So my first question, we obviously have you here to talk some Patriots. I was told that is your team of origin.
It is.
I have been referencing DVOA for this series for a very long time, so it's really cool to get you here. I think, even selfishly for myself, but I think a lot of the viewers Would love to get a little bit of a kind of peek behind the curtain, kind of hear you talk a little bit about kind of how the sausage gets made a little bit with DVOA and what kind of variables all go into calculating that.
Well, basically, the short version is that it gives a success rating based on the down and distance for every play in the NFL, and then compares that to a baseline, a league average baseline that's adjusted for situation and opponent. So everything above 0 means good offense, and everything below 0 means good defense. And I do special teams separately, and I add that in. It's also tweaked to be as predictive as possible. So, for example, turnovers are down-weighted a bit because turnovers are less predictive than yards and first downs. Garbage time is down-weighted a little bit, although not as much as people think. More time that you think is garbage time actually does matter than you think it does.
Okay.
And other things, there's other changes that try to make it as predictive as possible to be. The idea is to sort of try to get to the platonic ideal of how good a team is. Like, how close can we get to, if this was Madden, this would be the number on the team. If we actually knew how good, because we don't really know how good any team is, right? You only see 17 games during the regular season or whatever. Yeah. But if we really knew, like, how close are we to how good a team really is?
So I'm curious about special teams too, because I added a special teams component to my series here. That's kind of where I clock out is with special teams, just watching the tape and stuff. So I factor in, I put together a formula and I factor in the DVOA team grade. And I'm always curious, like, cause I'll use that and the PFF team grade. I'm curious, like, how do you weight, say, like, how much plays into that with like kicker success, punter success, or like the kick coverage aspect?
It's mostly based on an expected points added type system.
Okay.
I don't include certain plays that are what I call non-predictive plays. That's different from lucky, right? Like a blocked field goal is not necessarily lucky, right? You practice the blocked field goal, so if you get it, it's right. You did something good. But it's not predictive that you're going to block another field goal. So I measure field goals and extra points, and then kickoffs and kick returns, punts and punt returns, based on sort of, based on where you kick the ball, where would you be expected to return it to, based on where you catch the kick, where would you be expected to return it to, that sort of thing.
Gotcha. Okay. So as we transition more to the Patriots side of things here, you've obviously got years of like looking at schedule data, and there's been a lot of conversation about the, Drake May is the schedule, and they had quite the easy schedule last year. I'm curious from your perspective, like, just how easy was that schedule last year, and how much should Patriots fans be, I don't know, like tempering expectations or trying to factor that into how they think about this team for 2026?
Yeah, I liked it better when Drake May's nickname was Drake May.
The good old days.
I do feel like I was a bit of Cassandra of the Patriots. Like I was Cassandra of the Gillette Stadium press box last year going, they're not as good as you think they are. They're not. And then they ended up going to the Super Bowl anyway. But we were writing all year about how easy their schedule turned out. So by average DVOA of opponent, it was the fourth easiest schedule of the last 50 years. It was the
Did you
third
say 58?
50. It was the third easiest schedule, and then I did 1977, and the 1977 Bears are easier. So now it's the fourth easiest schedule, but it was the easiest since the 99 Rams. So it was really easy. Now here's the thing. First of all, this year's schedule is not hard. They did not go from an absurdly easy schedule to a hard schedule. They went from an absurdly easy schedule to an average schedule, right? So it's not that all of a sudden they're, the Rams have one of the hardest schedules, and the Cardinals, they don't have a schedule like that, but it looks average, and that's a big difference from last year. But the other thing is, we can talk about reasons for this, but I think there are good reasons to believe this team is going to be better than it was last year. So it's very likely you're going to end up with a team that's actually better, but looks worse, because the schedule is normal instead of what they had last year.
Absolutely. I agree with that sentiment as well. And we'll start talking about some positive things for this Patriots team, I promise. But my next question also, like when I look back on last year's team, they didn't just have an easy schedule. I actually thought they were pretty remarkably healthy as well.
Yes.
I'm curious if you agree with that statement. And I guess if there's any added worry from health regression on top of it.
I believe by our adjusted games lost, they were the healthiest team in the league. And so, yes, you can't expect that again. You would have to expect average health, which we do. Now, it's interesting in my projection system. So in the book, for folks who don't know, we do a preseason book. It's called the FTN Football Almanac 2026. It looks like this. You can buy a physical copy, or the PDF is at ftnfantasy.com/almanac. In the projections that I do, it actually doesn't hurt teams to come off a healthy year. Instead, it helps teams to have come off an injured year. Mm-hmm. So I account for the quality of the injured players who are coming back. But I've never been able to get a variable that works based on just this is how injured they were overall.
Yeah.
So in other words, instead of hurting the Patriots, it helps the Arizona Cardinals and the San Francisco 49ers, which once you average out the whole league, hurts the Patriots.
Yeah, that's well said. Yep. I'm glad you said that, because that's the same thing that shows up in these videos too. People always complain because I show like off-season changes. With the additions, I include players coming back from injuries, and people are like, what are you talking about? That's not an addition. I'm like, he wasn't on the team last year, so it absolutely matters. Now, if those things are going to add up and create some potential regression in some areas, what to you has you excited? You mentioned it earlier. This team could be a better football team. What are some of the areas that you are counting on potentially like countering the regression that is maybe heading their way?
When your quarterback has one of the best ever second-year quarterback seasons, you do expect a bit of regression in the third year. Dan Marino in 1985 was not the Dan Marino of 1984. And even Patrick Mahomes in 2019 was not the Patrick Mahomes of 2018. Right? So you expect a little bit of regression. A good way to counter that regression is to trade for A.J. Brown. So I really like adding A.J. Brown and Romeo Doubs. ESPN does these tracking metrics that are based on the next-gen tracking. And Brown was like number one receiver in the league 2 years ago. And last year he was still in the top 10, even with the problems they had with the offense, the Eagles. So he's really good. And Dobbs is really good. And the defense, I think there's reasons to believe it will be improved. I talk a lot about that defenses that improve in the second half of the year, it doesn't necessarily carry over to the next year. But I think that what the Patriots discovered in the playoffs was how to play their scheme in a better way. And I think that may roll over a little bit. They're not going to play as well as they did in the playoffs, but they're not going to face those offensive lines either. But I do think their defense was the thing that was most affected by the schedule, much more than Drake May. Their defense, They played some easy quarterbacks. So their defense was not really that good during the regular season, and it should be better this year.
Was there anything from kind of a scheme point of view that you noticed, especially in those playoffs, that you think was like really clicking in, like whether it was, more blitzing or changing coverages, or just was there anything that stood out?
More blitzing.
Yeah.
And the feeling that their cornerbacks can cover. And I mean, they have Gonzalez. So I don't think Christian Gonzalez is the best corner in the league. The fact that he has the highest Madden rating of any corner in the league is a little nuts to me. I would have Surtain higher. I would have Derek Stingley higher, but he's very, very good.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that. With Drake May, we saw him struggle in the playoffs after such an awesome regular season. What were some of the things that stood out to you that he was really struggling with, that you're looking at as parts of his game that you want to see him improve next season and beyond?
I mean, the pressure and needing guys who could get open against man coverage, and A.J. Brown brings that. But also like sack to pressure rate. I think his sack to pressure rate went way up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
You know, he was feeling more pressure because of the offensive line, but then he was feeling more pressure because of himself. You know, pressure is sort of sacks have much more to do with the quarterback than people believe usually. And pressure has some more to do with the quarterback than people believe. And so it was sort of like the offensive line struggles were making pressure for him, but he was making pressure for himself.
Yeah, I agree with that. The pocket presence with him is a big area to just the way he kind of mitigates the way the pocket's breaking
that kind
down.
of went away in the playoffs a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And then another guy I wanted to get your take on is Travion Henderson. They obviously spent a big draft pick on him. A lot of hype coming out of Ohio State. To me, I really liked him at first, and then once I kind of opened up the hood and really got into the tape on him, I was like, man, the vision is kind of an issue. He doesn't have a lot of instincts. I was a little worried about him, living up to being such a big draft pick. I'm curious where you're at with him and your expectations for him, if you see similar concerns to me, or if you would maybe push back on some of those concerns.
Running back scouting is certainly not an area of my expertise.
Sure.
I will tell you, first of all, it surprised me. His success rate was higher than I expected. You think of him as a boom and bust guy who's going to have a low success rate because when he does hit, he goes all the way. But his success rate was like 13th among qualified running backs. It was good. And he was better running outside zone than inside. So I think that may play into your question about vision. And he just needs to improve finding the right holes when he runs inside. Yeah. And, I think he can do that. And you usually would expect a player in the second year with the veteran as the other running back. You would expect Henderson to get more carries and Stevenson to get fewer this year. That's just usually how those things go.
Yeah. All right, so what to you are going to be the biggest question marks, one for the offense, one for the defense, kind of those pivotal factors, the wild cards for the Patriots this year?
I mean, I'm not breaking any barriers here by saying the offensive line is the big question, right? We all have the same question, which is, can Will Campbell play left tackle? Is what we saw in the playoffs, is that the Will Campbell we're going to get? Or is that Will Campbell had not fully come back from his injury? Plus, Will Campbell was facing a couple of the best pass rushes in the NFL. And that against an average pass rush and with a healthy body, he'll be better. Because obviously, then that changes what they do down the road with Lomu. Because is Lomu the replacement for Morgan Moses next year? Or does he replace Campbell and Campbell bumps inside? And if Campbell bumps inside, where does he go? Because you now have Vera Tucker at left guard, if Vera Tucker can stay healthy, which is the other big question about the offensive line.
Yeah.
Or does Onwenu go elsewhere at some point? So the offensive line is the big question on the offense. The defense, it's the edge rush, right? Like, they don't have a guy who's the guy. Like, how good is Draymond Jones? How much do they want to ever mix him inside? Is he really a pure edge rusher? Landry is fine, but he's not like great. Who is Gabe Jackas? He was not one of our highest. We have a thing called Saxier that projects edge rushers. He wasn't one of our highest projected edge rushers, but enough edge rushers went in the first round that there really weren't any highly projected ones left by the time the Patriots took Jackas. So
yeah.
Do they have to make the pass rush more with scheme, which I think they do, than with the guys?
For sure. I'm curious because I'm glad you showed the almanac, and you guys are putting together, right, kind of like call it, I don't know if you would do like power rankings or team power or whatever, right? You're kind of trying to rank and project the teams in that, or am I wrong?
Yes, we have the DVOA projections, which is our projection for how good teams are going to be, offense, defense, and special teams. It's the average of a range of possibilities, right? Because the thing about predicting football is that every team has a range of possibilities. This is the hardest sport to predict of the major American sports. But then we simulate the season 50,000 times, and then we give the average of that range of possibilities, right? So that is how we get like wins and losses. And Then throughout the season, we update with data from what's actually going on, what I call Dave ratings, which I call Dave ratings because I was like, I can't do any more crazy acronyms. Might as well just call them Dave. And that combines the preseason projections with the in-season data until you get late in the year, and then it's only in-season data. You learn more offensively than defensively. Like defensively, you learn much more slowly. Offensively, like within a few weeks, you know how good a team is for the year.
Yeah. If you're willing to spoil it, I don't want, obviously you guys should check this thing out. Like if you're into this series, you'd definitely be to the almanac. But
look at that.
Are you willing to tell us compared to like the Bills? Because obviously the rest of this division is not going to be in the same ballpark.
Is the word you wanted sucks?
Yeah. The AFC least, I believe it's been called a time or two over the years.
Yeah.
But how are you feeling about them? Competing with the Bills. Who do you kind of stack above each other?
I have the Bills slightly ahead.
Yeah.
Our defensive projections like the Bills a lot more than you think they would.
Yeah, interesting.
Partly because the Bills have had good defense for years until last year. So you see some bounce back there. Uh-huh. But obviously their offenses, they have maybe the best quarterback in the game. I mean, as far as consistency, last year, Drake May was the best quarterback in the game. But if you're going to predict based on like the last 3 years, you probably would pick Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. So we have Buffalo with 10.0 mean wins in our simulations, and the Patriots at 9.6. Okay. So the Bills win the division like 50% of the time, and the Patriots like 40% of the time.
Okay.
And something really weird happens the other 10%.
Yeah.
The Dolphins, it's really hard to see how they would compete. The Jets, you can see it. If Geno Smith gets his mojo back, they've brought in enough veterans on defense that they could put an average defense on the field. They were so ridiculously low last year in turnovers. There's no way that's going to happen again. They're not getting 0 interceptions again. On offense, if Geno gets his groove back, there is a good young core of skill players there. I'd say there's like a 1 in 100 chance that this happens, but I can see how it happens.
But in your simulations, it sounds like they want it
like 6%. It had to be like 8, 6%. Because weird stuff happens in the NFL all the time.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Drake May gets hurt, and Josh Allen gets hurt in the same year. Weird stuff happens.
Yeah, totally. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Remind people one more time about what all you got going on, where they can find the almanac and everything that you got going.
Yeah. First of all, you should check out FTN Fantasy in general. It's not just fantasy, but we do have award-winning fantasy projections. We have picks. We do a number of different sports. And if you get an FTN subscription, you get all kinds of charting data that is updated live during the season. Not live during games, but on Tuesday. And you get DVOA for all the chart. Like, you wanted to know which team is the best at man coverage, you're going to get EPA, you get DVOA. It's all updated all year long with the subscription, plus the award-winning fantasy projections. The book is called FTN Football Almanac 2026. You can get a physical copy at Amazon by searching for that, or go to ftnfantasy.com/almanac. And there is a sample chapter up, so you get to read about the Indianapolis Colts. And if you like that kind of thing, then you buy the book, and there's 32 chapters on every team, plus all kinds of stuff on all the skill position players to get you ready for your fantasy drafts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you for watching.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So thank you again to Aaron for doing that. Really cool to not just get the Patriots' opinion, but to get a little peek underneath the hood of what goes into DVOA as well. So really appreciate that, but let's have a little bit of fun here. Obviously, these are like week 1 power rankings up to this point. Trying to take an even perspective, ranking everybody at their floor, a neutral outlook on every team. Now I'm going to, put my foot down a little bit. What do I actually think happens here with the Patriots? So the schedule is the conversation, and I liked what Aaron said. Like, it's still not a horrible schedule. You still get to play the Jets and the Dolphins a total of 4 times. So that's nice. Also, your game that was supposed to be at Detroit is in Munich. I'd rather play that game in Munich than at Ford Field, I'll say that. You do square off against the NFC North, which is a very good division, and the AFC West, which is a very good division. So that's where the schedule is certainly going to get harder for you here. But it's ultimately kind of a still average to more favorable schedule, I think. You do definitely have your harder games, though, like at Buffalo, at Seattle, at the Chargers, at the Chiefs. Yeah, like you got the Bills twice. Like you're going to have some tough games. Green Bay, Denver, Chicago, Minnesota, Detroit. Like it does add up, especially compared to what they had last year. So I did get a good laugh out of the fact that this team is such an obvious regression candidate that the market is like maybe even overreacting. Their over-under is 9.5 wins after they won 14 games last year. They can't get people, they at this point, they can't even get Patriots fans to bet on this team to win 11 games if the casino's mortgage depended on it. I almost think that's going too far. Like, I still look at this as a super high floor team led by Mike Vrabel and ascending Drake May that got better on offense and about the same on defense. Do I think they get more hurt? Yeah. Do I think they have harder games that they're going to lose? Yeah. Do I think that means they go from a 14-win team to a 8 or a 9-win team? Probably not. I think their floor is 9 wins. I mean, dude, those Vrabel teams at the end of the Tennessee regime were worse than this and had brutal health, and they were still like competing for the 1 seed in the AFC. So I am ultimately technically higher on the Patriots by predicting them to win 10 games. And when I really look back on this team, I think where I'm lower on the Patriots is probably the upside. And that's going to lead to like, okay, the 12th power ranking here that obviously Patriots fans are just not going to be happy about after they won the AFC last year. But like FanDuel has them 6th to 9th in Super Bowl odds. To me, that's like overcompensating for the fact that they got there last year. I don't know. Neither of those make sense. I see this as a much higher floor team, but the upside to me is a little bit lower. Like, I think the defense is good, but about what it's going to be. I don't think this is like a crazy intimidating defense. I think the offense is really good and has a chance to be very good as well if they do hit some green lights. And I'm not going to say like this team can't win the Super Bowl or anything like that, but you know, they're tied for 6th in Super Bowl odds. I obviously have my fair share teams ahead of them there, but definitely compared to other playoff teams, I would just say my like Spark Notes analysis on the Patriots is like it's a very high floor, relatively high ceiling, but not as high ceiling as some of the other contenders in the AFC and NFC. So a 9 to 11 floor ceiling projection for me, and I landed right in the middle of that with a 10-win prediction. So I'm curious what Patriots fans think of that perspective on this team, if you agree or disagree with that assessment. But let's finish with some fun and pick some team awards for the Patriots. So for team MVP, I am going to go with Christian Gonzalez here just because he's so good. And part of the Mike Vrabel defense is the ability to run man coverage a decent amount when they want to. Or to be able to, you know, zero blitz in the playoffs and take a Christian Gonzalez and put him on your best wide receiver and take him away. That's incredibly valuable. So he to me is the best player on this team and the team MVP. The other contender there would be A.J. Brown for sure. But I did lean Gonzalez. The biggest wild card is obvious to me. It is Elijah Vera Tucker with his injury record. He looks great right now here in August, but we've got a long way to go until he's available for this team in meaningful football games in November, December, January. So it's really just health with him, but it's a big deal. Breakout offense and honestly breakout defense. This is another thing with Patriots is it's like, you tell me who you think the breakout players are. It's not a lot of great options, especially if you're not a Travion Henderson guy like me. I actually went with Romeo Doubs for breakout offense, just from a public perception standpoint. And like, I don't know that he's necessarily going to like play above the 80 rating or whatever. I think that's roughly who he is, but I don't know that that's necessarily how he's perceived. And I think if the Patriots are winning a lot of games and Dobbs looks, like a 1,000-yard receiver and a really good compliment to A.J. Brown, I think that would probably be considered in the public eye a breakout for Romeo Dobbs. That was largely, though, just I didn't have a lot of great options. The other guy I thought about was definitely Jared Wilson. Again, these are more like gun to my head prediction type analysis. Like, what do I actually think happens? I think Jared Wilson has a good year. Do I think he's viewed as the breakout player of the Patriots this year? Probably not. I think he's probably still, going to take some ups and downs and be a pretty good player, but maybe not like a bona fide stud breakout. So I struggled with the breakout offense, and the breakout defense I struggled with even more. I thought about just going NA because there's really nobody that had a green up arrow for me for this defense. I thought about just going with nobody. I really did. I just don't see a ton to get excited about with improvement for this defense. Like, the next closest thing is probably I guess Gabe Akis. But I'm not the biggest Gabe Akis guy, and I'm not considering rookies for this award anyway. Maybe Craig Woodson, but he kind of broke out last year as a rookie. So, do I think he's better than last year? It's possible, but not necessarily something I'm going to sit here and predict, gun to my head. I really did struggle with this. I settled on Elijah Ponder. I kind of liked the tape, man. I think he's a good fit. I don't think he needs to do as much to break out either. If he's just a nice rotational third piece, gets you 40 pressures and maybe gets a little better as a run defender, I think that's probably, the closest thing I can pick to a breakout on this defense. Both the unsung hero and my fantasy MVP are the same player, and you can probably guess it based on the analysis earlier in the video. Ramondre Stevenson. I think he is the lifeblood of an offense that, at the end of the day, wants to be an inside the tackles run game, an area that TreVeyon Henderson really struggles at. Someone that is not a fan favorite because everybody wants to see TreVeyon Henderson being the flashy new toy out of Ohio State, whereas we've kind of been there, done that with Ramondre Stevenson. But I think he finishes this year again as definitively the best running back here, and for that reason, he's my fantasy MVP. I think this is going to be a high-scoring offense. I think Ramondre Stevenson is the lead back of that offense and someone that is probably going to be more involved in the receiving game than you would think. Like I said earlier, Stevenson actually had double the receiving yards of TreVeyon Henderson last year and is a better pass blocker, whereas Henderson was praised for that coming out. And that doesn't make any sense to me. I think you take Ramondre Stevenson as the 30th running back off the board. He's your RB2 and you sleep like a baby every week. You take TreVeyon Henderson and he's your RB2, and you're going to get some explosive weeks that make you happy, but you're going to get 4 straight weeks of nothing from him. He'll be like the running back version of Deshaun Jackson. And it could also reach a point where you end up really frustrated trying to know which weeks to start TreVeyon Henderson. So definitely a pretty easy pick for me to circle Ramondre Stevenson as a fantasy value for this Patriots team. I'm curious, again, if Patriots fans agree with that. So this is probably going to be a controversial one. The defending AFC champs at the 12 spot. There's probably going to be some very loud, very mad Patriots fans. And if that's the case, let me have it. This team climbed above their ranking last year. They could easily do it again this year, of course. But I want to hear all your thoughts, good and bad. Let me know who you think comes in with the 11 spot in these rankings. We're really getting into it. At the end of the day, you got to realize how tightly knit these teams are. I mean, that's the NFL, right? The number 12 team in the NFL is absolutely a Super Bowl contender, and the Patriots should have the utmost expectations once again. But they're going to have to really step it up and probably outkick their coverage in terms of roster talent, as we saw some areas on this team of just, pretty high floor, but not going to blow you away in a lot of spots with this team. So that's all I got. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you. Check out the store. Get a hat on your way out here while you still can. They're selling out fast. Please do hit that like button, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.